Chapter 531. When one's strength reached a certain level, one could break through all methods. Now, Chu Xiu's method of raising his strength to the extreme without using martial arts was a bit of a waste of energy, but it was really useful. Moreover, the people who inspired Chu Xiu were Zhongxian and Chen Qingdi. Zhongxian only cultivated the Bright King Seal, but he was able to transform the Bright King Seal into a shocking cultivation. No one knew what martial arts Chen Qingdi had cultivated, but last time in the Dong family, Chen Qingdi's fist had defeated the Dong family's patriarch, Dong Qikuan, had left a deep impression on Chu Xiu. One punch to break through all methods. No one could stop it. Now, Chu Xiu could only use the true meaning, and he could not comprehend that kind of powerful fist intent. However, with the help of Chu Xiu's strength, this punch already had a bit of Chen Qingdi's flavor. On the other side, when Taoist Miao Xian saw that Chu Xiu had so easily smashed his horsetail whisk and long sword, he immediately screamed, "Disciples! Get into formation and attack. Lend me a hand." The role of Taoist Miao Xian's female disciples was not only that they could sleep with big breasts, they themselves were Taoist Miao Xian's dual cultivation partners, but they were not blindly demanding cauldrons, but yin and yang dual cultivation. The true qi and internal strength of both sides complemented each other, and could even be borrowed at a critical moment. When his female disciples heard this, they immediately formed a seal, stood in a row, and poured their internal strength into the body of the person in front of them, increasing one by one, and finally pouring it into Taoist Miao Xian's body. Although the whole process seemed to be complicated, it was extremely fast. Obviously, Taoist Miao Xian had often cultivated or used this move. His hands formed two seals, and Taoist Miao Xian's mouth spat out a mantra. In an instant, like a thunder explosion, it resounded in Chu Xiu's ears. It was somewhat similar to the Buddhist lion's roar and Chu Xiu's outer lion seal. However, although Chu Xiu's mental strength was in a state of being overdrawn and injured, his foundation was still there. Therefore, Chu Xiu's body only moved slightly when the thunderous sound pierced his ears, and he returned to normal. At this time, Taoist Miao Xian had already formed two seals. One clear and one turbid Gang Qi turned into yin and yang Tai Chi power and appeared in front of him, wanting to block Chu Xiu. However, under Chu Xiu's invincible punch, the giant shield condensed from yin and yang Tai Chi power shattered. However, at the same time, the aura of Chu Xiu's punch finally dissipated, and he was unable to take another step forward. Although Taoist Miao Xian's attack had blocked Chu Xiu's punch, he was still heavily injured by the force. He and the dozen or so female disciples behind him spat out a mouthful of blood as shock flickered in their eyes. Chu Xiu had never been a person who had tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. He was more like ruthlessly destroying a flower. Therefore, Chu Xiu did not show the slightest mercy in this attack. Taoist Miao Xian was seriously injured, but the female disciples behind him were even more seriously injured. Some were even directly killed by Chu Xiu on the spot. After all, Taoist Miao Xian was a great master in the unity of heaven and man realm. Among the female disciples under his command, there were actually only a few who had stepped into the three-flower realm. Seeing that Chu Xiu had already stepped forward, Taoist Miao Xian was scared out of his wits. He didn't even care about the female disciples who had already died. He frantically fled in one direction. Chu Xiu secretly released the power of the binding seal. In less than 3 steps, he had already appeared behind Taoist Miao Xian, intending to kill him with a punch. However, at this time, a strong man with a beast-like violent aura collided with Chu Xiu's fist. In an instant, the Gang Qi exploded, and the two figures quickly retreated. However, Chu Xiu only retreated 3 steps, while the strong man retreated dozens of steps. This strong man was called Meng Gang. He was not a warrior from the south of Yen, but a rogue warrior from the west of Yen. This person had once joined the military and was a bandit. He had also been a guest of the Huangfu clan, but it was not a long time. Because of his bad temper, it was easy for him to offend people. Therefore, he usually did not stay in any place for long before he offended the people around him. In the end, he could only helplessly leave. Cui Lu was one of the few people who could tolerate his bad temper, so the two naturally became good friends. Meng Gang was also one of the few people who helped Cui Lu not because of the benefits, but because of their friendship. Chu Xiu looked at Meng Gang and narrowed his eyes. His figure rushed towards Meng Gang again. His body was surrounded by Buddha's light, but the outside world was filled with demonic flames, making him look like a god or a demon. Punch after punch landed, and Chu Xiu completely crushed Meng Gang with his physical body. In the beginning, Meng Gang was still barely able to resist, but as time went on, the crisp sounds of bones cracking could be heard from his body. In the end, he was already spitting out blood from Chu Xiu's attacks, and even his arm was completely twisted. At this time, Cui Lu, who had recovered, shouted, "Everyone, attack together." As his voice fell, Cui Lu stretched out his hand. His slender fingers moved continuously, and an ice flower bloomed. It was only the size of a palm, but there was no trace of Gang Qi in it. It was as if it was completely born in this world. But in the blink of an eye, the ice flower appeared above Chu Xiu's head and exploded. Thousands of cold needles shot out, straight towards Chu Xiu. Boundless devil flames rose up, and before those ice needles could even touch Chu Xiu's body, they were melted by the devil flames. However, after the ice needles melted, they turned into a cold mist that permeated every nook and cranny. It actually froze everything around Chu Xiu, making him feel as if he was in the middle of winter. Even Chu Xiu's true qi felt a little sluggish. At this time, the other martial artists also rushed over. Taoist Miao Xian, who was scared by Chu Xiu and fled frantically, also waved his hands, and his Gang Qi evolved into a yin and yang formation plate, smashing towards Chu Xiu. The dark night sky had been illuminated by various colors of Gang Qi. Within a radius of 100 feet, the raindrops were completely shattered by the Gang Qi before they could fall to the ground. The power of this attack was extremely shocking. A martial Dao Grandmaster would have an advantage in this kind of group battle. With the true martial Dan in his body, a martial Dao Grandmaster could erupt with his most powerful power without any scruples. Later, the true martial Dan would naturally quickly extract the heaven and earth Yuan Qi to replenish the consumption. Now that Chu Xiu had gone all out, his explosive power was not inferior to some weaker martial Dao masters, but his recovery ability was much worse than that of a martial Dao master. So for Chu Xiu, there was only one chance. This time, he had to completely defeat these people. In an instant, Chu Xiu's eyes were bloodshot, and he had already stepped into the selfless killing realm. Chu Xiu formed a seal with his hand, and his body was surrounded by bright Buddha light and monstrous demonic qi. The Mahavajra was displayed, and the incomparably evil Mahavajra directly enveloped everyone present. Vajra suppresses demons, incomparable strength, Mara bewitches heart, monstrous demonic flame. The two completely different powers were displayed to the extreme by Chu Xiu. It was not a combination of hardness and softness, but a separation of Buddha and demonic. Endless Gang Qi shattered under the suppression of the Buddha light, and the martial artists who rushed up were blasted away by the boundless demonic qi. Some of the weaker martial artists were even killed on the spot by the demonic qi entering their bodies. In the powerful Gang Qi storm, Chu Xiu's face was slightly pale. He had really used his full strength in that attack just now, directly urging his own strength to the limit that his physical body could reach, so that he could block the joint attack of these people. At this time, Chu Xiu's figure did not stop, and directly rushed towards Taoist Miao Xian. There were too many of these people, and their strength was generally good. Chu Xiu could not give them a chance to regroup again, he had to completely defeat them. At this time, Taoist Miao Xian was holding his chest and panting. In fact, in that attack just now, apart from the consumption of true qi, Taoist Miao Xian did not suffer any serious injuries. Among these people, Taoist Miao Xian was famous for being extremely cunning. Just now when he saw that something was wrong, he immediately changed from offensive to defensive, so he was not injured at this time. However, seeing that Chu Xiu actually went straight for him, Taoist Miao Xian was so angry that he wanted to curse. Among these people present, the strongest was Cui Lu, and Cui Lu was also the organizer. If Lin Yi wanted to kill someone, he should kill Cui Lu first. Why was he staring at him? If Taoist Miao Xian knew that it was because of his appearance that attracted more hatred, he probably would not even have the mood to curse. Just now, Taoist Miao Xian had already seen Chu Xiu's strength, so he absolutely did not dare to go head-on with Chu Xiu again. At this time, seeing that Chu Xiu was attacking, Taoist Miao Xian did not say a word. His whole body was wrapped in yin-yang true qi, and his whole body floated like a willow in the wind, wanting to quickly retreat. However, at this time, strands of devil qi lingered behind him. In an instant, Taoist Miao Xian suddenly felt the blood in his whole body boiling. The burning pain immediately made Taoist Miao Xian let out a muffled groan, and his body stopped moving. Boundless devil qi enveloped Taoist Miao Xian. Strands of devil qi seeped into Taoist Miao Xian's body, pulling out his qi and blood. The pitch-black devil qi was mixed with scarlet qi and blood. That black-red color looked extremely evil and indescribable. Chu Xiu squinted his eyes. At this moment, he suddenly had a new understanding of the great devil blood technique. Stepping forward, Chu Xiu placed his hand on Taoist Miao Xian's head. In an instant, boundless devil qi erupted, and countless amounts of blood were forcibly pulled out from Taoist Miao Xian's body. His whole body turned into a pitch-black corpse, and he fell to the ground, without a human shape. All along, Chu Xiu thought that the great devil blood technique was used to guide blood and qi, and as a supplementary technique, to provide power to the blood-dissipating blade. It was only now that Chu Xiu realized a new way to use it. The great devil blood technique used the word devil in front, and the word blood behind. When the two were combined, the power that could be exerted was also incomparably overbearing. At this time, Cui Lu and the others saw the corpse beside Chu Xiu, which no longer resembled a human shape, and felt a chill in their hearts. So many of them had surrounded and ambushed him, but this guy had actually killed a warrior at the unity of heaven and man realm. How strong was this Lin Yi? Cui Li's heart sank. This didn't match his plan at all. Chapter 532. This battle had been a mistake from the very beginning. Cui Lu and the others had underestimated Chu Xiu and overestimated themselves. One wrong step led to many more mistakes. Cui Lu and the others were already half a step into the gates of hell. At first, they had wanted to ambush Chu Xiu, but now it was Chu Xiu who had reaped their lives. Chu Xiu turned his head. No one could see the expression on his face, but they could see his scarlet eyes. As Chu Xiu stepped forward, wisps of demon qi drifted in the air. Even if the martial artists wanted to escape, once they were caught in the demon qi, their bodies trembled and their blood was sucked dry. The blood and demon qi lingered around Chu Xiu, causing the terrifying aura around him to grow stronger and stronger. It was as if a demon god had descended. The martial artists present finally couldn't bear it any longer and immediately scattered in all directions. However, Chu Xiu went straight towards Cui Lu. This fellow was the mastermind behind all this. The others could leave, but he had to stay here. Cui Lu clenched his teeth. Astral energy shimmered around his body as he rapidly formed hand seals. Thousands of strange flowers bloomed, each flower containing powerful fluctuations of astral energy. All of these flowers rushed towards Chu Xiu. Facing this attack, the boundless blood qi behind Chu Xiu condensed into the Dharma idol of the prison-guarding Wisdom King. With a single seal, everything returned to nothingness. A powerful force crushed down on Cui Lu, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. His face was filled with shock. At this moment, Meng Gang's entire body shone with a dazzling golden light. At the same time, strands of blood energy began to burn. He seemed to have transformed into the incarnation of a mighty god as he charged towards Chu Xiu. As he charged, he roared, "Brother Cui, run!" At the same time, several other martial artists who hadn't fled followed Meng Gang to attack Chu Xiu, all of them using their trump cards. Cui Lu wasn't a hypocrite like Nieren Long. He was a true villain, but even a villain would have a few true friends. Meng Gang had a bad temper. He only knew how to offend people, so he had no friends, only enemies and those who hated him. Cui Lu was one of the few people who could endure his bad temper and befriend him. Moreover, after Meng Gang offended others, it was Cui Lu who used his own connections to help him solve the problem. Regardless of whether Cui Lu regarded him as a friend or not, for Meng Gang, Cui Lu was his friend, his only friend. Benevolence, righteousness, and morality. Meng Gang lacked three. He was not a good person, and he had never saved anyone. On the contrary, he had been a bandit and killed many passing merchants. In this life, the only thing he had left was loyalty. At the very least, when he was in the military, he had never betrayed his comrades. When he was a bandit, he had never sold out his brothers. Now that his friends were in danger, he, Meng Gang, could also fight for loyalty. A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. The prison protector Wisdom King's seal fell down, along with the surrounding blood qi collected by Chu Xiu using the Great Devil Blood technique. The power of this seal was incomparably majestic, directly shattering Meng Gang's arms. The other martial artists who hadn't reached the unity of heaven and man boundary were directly killed by this powerful seal. Seeing this scene, Cui Lu couldn't help but be enraged. These people were his true friends. When Cui Lu said that he wanted to jointly manage the memorial hall with them, he wasn't deceiving them. Cui Lu really thought so. After wandering half his life, Cui Lu also wanted to have his own foundation, for his descendants, for his friends, to fight for a future. Unfortunately, he miscalculated, and this mistake turned everything into nothing. With Meng Gang blocking in front of him, he could escape, and there was a certain chance that he could escape. But Cui Lu still didn't take this last step. Instead, he roared angrily, and directly inserted his hand into his heart. In an instant, a large amount of blood flowed out. The blood flowed to the ground, but it evolved into a strange blood-red giant flower. It was as tall as a person, and the scarlet petals were incomparably magnificent, shining with a ferocious blood-red light. If someone from the Buddhist sects came, they would easily recognize this flower. It was called the red spider lily, also known as the red spider lily. It bloomed on the road to the yellow springs, sending the souls of the dead to their graves. The red spider lily bloomed, enveloping Chu Xiao. It represented the power of death, the power of hell that Cui Lu drew in with his own life. Under the blooming red spider lily, the blood qi melted, the demonic qi dissipated, and the power even made Chu Xiao's heart palpitate. This was no longer a life-risking secret technique, it was simply a move to perish together. At this moment, the prison-guarding Wisdom King's Dharma form behind Chu Xiao suddenly changed. Boundless blood qi and demonic qi merged into it, transforming the Wisdom King's Dharma form into the Buddha form. However, the Buddha form was blood-red, so scarlet that it sent chills down one's spine. The boundless demonic qi transformed into a demonic blade in the Buddha's hand. From the looks of it, it was somewhat similar to Chu Xiao's heavenly demon dance. The blood-red Buddha held the demonic blade. This was Chu Xiao's Dharma form, the killing demon Buddha form. As the blade slashed down, boundless demonic qi condensed into a sharp blade, directly cutting the blood-red spider lily into pieces, turning it into countless blood-red stars that dissipated into the night sky. Cui Lu was not dead yet. He forced himself to look at Meng Gang and opened his mouth, but no sound came out. However, Meng Gang could read one word from the shape of his mouth, and that was run. After spitting out this word, Cui Li's body suddenly fell to the ground, lifeless. The red spider lily was a flower of death. Only his own death could cause the red spider lily to bloom. Cui Lu had cultivated this flower for half his life, but when Meng Gang needed it, it would be the day of his death. Meng Gang did not escape. He only stared blankly at Cui Li's corpse. The killing demon Buddha form behind Chu Xiao dissipated. He took a step forward and appeared in front of Meng Gang. He said calmly, "I really admire people who are loyal." If a normal person said such a thing, the next sentence would definitely be, "Because you are loyal, I won't kill you." However, Chu Xiao said next, "Since you are so loyal, I'll send you on your way. Since the two of you can't be born on the same day, the same month, and the same day, you can die on the same day." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiao directly shattered Meng Gang's heart meridian. Meng Gang did not resist. Perhaps to him, resistance was already meaningless. Looking at the corpses on the ground, Chu Xiao's expression did not change. Instead, he seized the time and left quickly. To Chu Xiao, there were only people he could kill and people he couldn't in this world. Although he admired these loyal people, "If you want to be my enemy, then I'm sorry, I still have to kill you." It was not easy for Chu Xiao to fight against so many people without his perception. He had consumed a lot of energy, so he had to recover to his peak first. Moreover, Chu Xiao had not expected that he would be the first to cultivate the great success stage of the great Vajra divine power, which allowed him to condense his own Dharma form. Originally, Chu Xiao thought that he would need to reach the martial Dao Grandmaster level before he could comprehend and condense his Dharma form. However, he did not expect that he would be so lucky this time and actually comprehend the killing demon Buddha form. The foundation of the great Vajra divine power was the cultivation of the physical body, but its true essence was the Dharma form that he condensed. However, it was estimated that even the creator of the great Vajra divine power in the past would not be able to recognize Chu Xiao's great Vajra divine power now. It was an orthodox Buddhist cultivation technique, but Chu Xiao ended up cultivating it in an extremely evil and messed up way. Just as Chu Xiao was hiding to recover his strength, the deaths of Cui Lu and the others caused an uproar. The previous batch of people who died were mostly nameless people, but Cui Lu and the others were not nameless people. Flower-bearing, Cui Lu, Temple Master Miao Yu, perfected Miao Xian, and giant spirit general Meng Gang were all famous experts in the northern Yan land. Martial artists at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm were all famous existences, and these three were considered experts even among the many Unity of Heaven and Man realm martial artists. In the end, they still died in the hands of Chu Xiu, and more than 10 lives were lost. This was like a basin of cold water directly poured over everyone's heads, and it also calmed those who were prepared to kill Lin Yi in exchange for a better future. It was only then that they seriously thought about it. If Lin Yi was really so easy to kill, why would Nie Renlong put up a bounty for the position of the Loyalty Manor's leader? Even if Nie Renlong was muddle-headed from anger, he would not be so careless. Cui Lu and the others were dead, but they were considered to have done a great service. Because of their deaths, a bunch of people who were about to die were saved. At that moment, in the Loyalty Manor, Nie Renlong was frantically throwing vases, tables and chairs, and everything he could see. He failed again and again. Where did this Lin Yi come from? How many lives did he have? Why couldn't so many people kill him? The surrounding disciples of the Memorial Manor looked at Nie Renlong with trepidation. Since Nie Donglio's death, the usually calm and indifferent leader seemed to have changed into a different person. His temper became incomparably irritable and abnormally terrifying. After a long while, Nie Renlong roared, "I don't believe that we can't kill a demonic junior with all the strength of the Loyalty Manor. Go find Yuan Ji and have him continue to calculate Lin Ye's location. Then, find the Blue Dragon Society and pay them a large sum of money to kill Lin Yi." At that moment, a disciple of the Loyalty Manor said with a bitter smile, "Manor Lord, please calm down. Grandmaster Yuan Ji has already left, and I'm afraid he's already left the Northern Yan. And you also know the rules of the Blue Dragon Society. If we had hired someone from the Blue Dragon Society to assassinate Lin Yi before this, it might have been possible. But now, Lin Ye's reputation has spread. If we hire the Blue Dragon Society to assassinate him, I'm afraid the price will not be much lower than assassinating a martial Dao Grandmaster. And you also know the rules of the Blue Dragon Society. If the situation changes and the Blue Dragon Society suffers casualties, it will be on the Loyalty Manor. Manor Lord, please reconsider." Chapter 533. Ever since Nie Donglio's death, even if Nie Renlong had recovered from his cultivation deviation, his personality would still become extremely irritable. The disciple's advice was right. Nie Renlong should calm down now, but Nie Renlong couldn't do it. The son that he had spent so much effort to nurture was killed, and the murderer was about to leave. How could he calm down? Looking coldly at the disciple from the morgue, Nie Renlong said in a cold voice, "Since Yuan Ji has run away, go find another fortune-teller for me. Can't he be the only fortune-teller in the whole of Northern Yan? If you can't find him, then go to the wind-sweeping pavilion and ask their fortune-teller for a high price. You don't need to care about the Blue Dragon Society. I only want the results. I just want to see Lin Ye's head." With a loud bang, Nie Renlong's footsteps paused. The ground immediately cracked inch by inch, and the entire house was almost destroyed by Nie Renlong. The rest of the warriors from the morgue shivered. Nie Renlong was already on the verge of going crazy. Whatever he said they had to do. Don't ever refute him. The storm in Jianghu hadn't completely dissipated, but at this time, Chu Xiu had already recovered his qi and was ready to go. Chu Xiu did not know if the deaths of Cui Lu and the others had alerted the people behind him, or if Nie Renlong had given up on hunting him down. Chu Xiu walked for a few days and did not encounter anyone who tried to stop him. He did not even see the people searching for him at the Memorial Manor. After a few days of rushing, Chu Xiu noticed that he was hungry, so he found a small town to buy some food. Even in a crowded place, no one recognized Chu Xiu. To be more accurate, no one continued to pursue him. However, Chu Xiu didn't slow down because of this. He still hurried at his fastest speed, but also didn't consume too much energy in his body. In the evening, Chu Xiu looked at the sky. It was overcast, and he was afraid that it would rain again. Chu Xiu was not afraid of the rain, but he was a little hungry at the moment. So he looked around and found an abandoned Taoist temple by the side of the road to rest and eat something. At this moment, Chu Xiu was not the only one in the Taoist temple. There were also a few Jianghu escorts and a group of merchants who seemed to be from a small family. The two groups of people were clearly separated. The escorts were born in the Jianghu and were more vulgar. A group of people roasted rations, drank wine, and chatted loudly about Jianghu gossip. On the other hand, the small family's caravan was much more well-behaved. The servants were resting, and a few people dressed like stewards were accompanying a young master, talking about something. This kind of situation was very normal. Even people from some small clans wouldn't spoil their children to the point where they didn't know anything. So these small clans would basically let their children participate in some of the family's businesses after they grew up. Even if they couldn't do it, they still had to participate. This was a must. However, at this moment, the young master from the small family seemed to be participating in the caravan for the first time. He kept complaining here and there. When he saw Chu Xiao coming in, he subconsciously snorted and wanted to drive him away. This small Taoist temple was only so big. He didn't want to be in the same room with those vulgar escorts. However, there were a lot of people on the other side. If there really was a conflict, they might not have the upper hand. So, he pinched his nose and tolerated the young master. However, now that he saw Chu Xiao in ordinary clothes and wearing a broken bamboo hat, he could tell that he was not an expert. He could still afford to offend such a person. However, at this moment, the steward of the caravan stopped the young master and said, "Young master, it's not easy for anyone to go out. Don't cause trouble. Have you forgotten what the family head told you?" Hearing the steward mention the family head, the young master also snorted discontentedly. However, he didn't say anything else. Chu Xiao didn't pay attention to them. He only lifted his face cloth and began to eat. He only revealed his mouth, and with the bamboo hat covering his face, no one noticed his appearance. At this moment, the escorts only glanced at Chu Xiao and continued to discuss. One of them said, "Brothers, have you heard about the devil Lin Yi? This person's reputation has been spreading like wildfire recently. It's said that this person is a direct descendant of the Kunlun demon sect. His methods are ruthless and his strength is extremely strong. Even Manor Lord Nye of the morale-gathering manor was willing to offer the position of Manor Lord as a reward to kill him, but he failed." Is that true? The Kunlun devil cult has been destroyed for so many years. How can there be so many descendants? Have you heard too much gossip in the pugilistic world? It's true. Think about it. If Lin Yi wasn't a descendant of the Kunlun devil cult, how could he be so powerful? Let me tell you, I have a brother who was one of the survivors who ambushed Lin Yi with playboy Cui Lu and the others. That battle was tragic. Master Miao Xian of Miaoyu Temple was directly refined into a mummy by the demonic technique. Giant Spirit General Meng Gang's hard body technique did not lose to the martial monks of Great Light Temple, but in the end, half of the bones in his body were shattered. Playboy Cui Lu even used a secret technique to fight for his life, but he exhausted himself to death. It is said that Lin Yi is 9 feet tall, has a green face and fangs, and has the appearance of a devil. One look from him and half of your soul will be taken away. He's even more terrifying than a martial arts master. Ha ha ha. Third brother Yang, you're bragging again. You don't care about your brothers and relatives. Those who were qualified to follow Playboy Cui Lu to kill Lin Yi were at least at the 5 cheese origin stage. You're not even at the innate stage, and you have a 5 cheese origin stage expert as your brother? Even if you lick his ass, he'll still look down on you. Third brother Yang's face turned red. What do you know? Do you think that expert will look down on others like you? I grew up with that brother of mine. Although I'm not as strong as him now, every time I return to my hometown, he'll treat me to a drink. He even calls me third brother. The escorts around them burst into laughter. The Taoist temple was filled with a joyous atmosphere. The young master from a small family curled his lips in disdain and said in a low voice, "Vulgar. Unsightly. You even put a devil cultivator on such a high pedestal. You're really unreasonable." At this moment, everyone present suddenly felt a chill. Even though they had lit a bonfire, they could not dispel the chill. Chu Xiao also put down his rations and raised his head. This wasn't his doing. Although Chu Xiao wasn't broad-minded, he wouldn't lower himself to the level of these low-level people in the pugilistic world just because of a few words from ignorant people. At this moment, a cold wind suddenly blew in from outside the Taoist temple. The door of the Taoist temple was blown open. 2 people wearing black clothes and black iron hats with dragon patterns on their heads and black iron masks on their faces walked in. The 2 of them were dressed exactly the same. The only difference was that one of them wore a mask with a picture of the tearful star and a sad crying face. The other one had a picture of the tearful star and a happy smiling face on his mask. Chu Xiao took a deep breath. He was very familiar with this attire. After all, he had stayed in the Blue Dragon Society for a long time. These two people were actually the branch leaders of the Blue Dragon Society. The group of escorts and the people from the small family were scared silly. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. For these low-level people in the pugilistic world, the Blue Dragon Society was too far away from them. The existence of a branch leader was practically a legend. The two of them walked into the temple. Tianfu branch leader, who was wearing a smiling mask, chuckled and said, "Young Master Lin Yi, you are really bold. After killing so many people, you still dare to swagger here. Are you really going to kill your way out of Northern Yen? Respect, respect." He was indeed worthy of being the rising star of the Yinma clan. He was bold and courageous. "Let me introduce myself. I am the new leader of the Northern Yen branch of the Blue Dragon Society, Song Xiao. I didn't think I'd get such a big job as soon as I arrived in the Northern Yen. Not bad, not bad." Compared to Song Xiao, who was a chatterbox and liked to repeat himself, the branch leader of the Weeping Sky branch was much more low-key. He only said lightly, "Weeping Sky branch leader, Han Weeping." Song Xiao's name was Song Xiao. He was always smiling. Han Weeping didn't cry, but the escorts and the young master from the small family were scared to the point of crying. What did they do before? They were actually gossiping about Lin Yi in front of him, especially that young man. He even said that he was a demon of the devil Dao. At this moment, he suddenly felt that it was all because of luck that he was still alive and breathing. Song Xiao looked at those people and smiled. "Why aren't you guys leaving? Are you waiting to watch the show? I'm a man of principle. I won't kill the innocent. But if you guys get hurt by accident, it has nothing to do with me." Hearing Song Xiao's words, the escorts and the people from the small family immediately pissed their pants and ran out of the Taoist temple. They even left the escorts and goods they were protecting behind. Chu Xiao didn't say much. He just looked at the two and squinted his eyes. How did the four big blood killers of the Blue Dragon Society get demoted to branch leaders? These two strange guys weren't simple. Although they were only one with the world, they were two of the four strongest assassins below the Grandmaster level in the Blue Dragon Society headquarters. They were called the four big blood killers. The remaining two were Song Wuxing and Song Wuming. The four of them usually fought in pairs. The reason why they were called the four great blood killers was because they had killed a martial Dao Grandmaster when they joined forces. To be able to kill a martial Dao master at the oneness of heaven and man state, even if the two of them attacked together, the result was shocking enough. Therefore, as long as Han Lei and Song Xiao worked together, or if Song Wuxing and Song Wuming worked together, their power would be equivalent to that of a martial Dao master. Nie Renlong also put in a lot of effort this time. With the righteous manners wealth, they couldn't invite a grandmaster. Even if they did, the only grandmasters in the Blue Dragon Society were the few dragon heads. By the time they invited someone, Chu Xiao would probably have left the Northern Yen. Therefore, Nie Renlong settled for the next best thing, and invited Han Weep and Song Xiao. Fortunately, for some unknown reason, these two had recently been demoted from the Azure Dragon Society's four blood hangmen to the position of division leaders. Otherwise, Nie Renlong would not have been able to invite these two. Chapter 534. Han Lei and Song Xiao blocked the entrance of the Taoist temple. There was not a trace of killing intent on their bodies, but it was precisely because of this that they appeared very strange. The two of them were the existences of the four great blood killers of the Blue Dragon Society. Only the heavens knew how many people had died by their hands. Yet, they were still able to control the killing intent within their bodies, not allowing even a trace of it to leak out. This was the most terrifying thing about them. Song Xiao took a step forward and said with a smile, "We have been entrusted with a task, so we have to be loyal to it. Although we were kicked out of the headquarters to the Northern Yen because of some accident, we can't throw away our old profession, right? Young Master Lin, please be on your way." Even when he was talking about killing people, Song Xiao's tone carried a kind of joyful emotion, as if he was happy about this matter. Song Xiao used a saber, while Han Lei used a sword. Song Xiao's saber was a long curved saber. It was like a crescent moon, but on its surface, there was a scorching aura of the sun. Han Lei's sword, on the other hand, looked like a rusty broken iron sword. However, as Han Lei infused his true energy into it, The long sword suddenly exploded with a chill that made one's heart palpitate. It was only now that Chu Xiu realized that the long sword was not rusty at all. It was obviously blood rust that had already dried up. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. These two were probably the most powerful existences among the elites of the Longhu leaderboard who were one with the world. If these two joined forces, they would have a high chance of killing a weaker martial arts master like Qiao Liandong. They were definitely formidable opponents. Therefore, Chu Xiu was even prepared to expose his identity and use all of his trump cards. However, at this moment, a female voice suddenly rang out. "Wait!" As the voice fell, a woman with an exquisite and graceful figure wearing a tight black warrior suit ran into the Taoist temple, holding a curved saber that looked like an embroidered eyebrow. She also wore a mask on her face, but it was not the black iron mask of the Blue Dragon Society. Instead, it was a purple mask of a goddess. Although her expression was exaggerated, it gave off a kind of melancholy feeling. Seeing the woman, Song Xiao hurriedly said, "Young miss, why did you come in? Didn't I say it before? Leave this matter to us brothers to handle." Lin Ye's strength is definitely worthy of being ranked in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard. He's not someone to be trifled with. It's no laughing matter if you accidentally injure him later on. Han Cry said directly, "It's dangerous, get out." The woman shook her head and said, "Uncle Song, Uncle Han, please wait a moment. This young master is my benefactor." Chu Xiu looked at the woman. The more he looked at her, the more familiar she seemed. At this time, the woman took off her mask, revealing a beautiful face. It was Mu Zi. Back then, when Chu Xiu joined the Blue Dragon Society, the first mission he carried out was related to Mu Zi. He helped her take revenge and annihilate the Yu clan. At the same time, it also established Chu Xiu's position in the Blue Dragon Society's Heavenly Sin branch. At that time, although Mu Zi had gotten her revenge, she wanted to commit suicide under the grief of her entire clan being annihilated. However, she was persuaded by a single sentence from Chu Xiu. Back then, when Chu Xiu persuaded Mu Zi, it was actually a matter of convenience. As for whether Mu Zi chose to commit suicide in the end, Chu Xiu had never cared. However, he never imagined that he would see Mu Zi again in this kind of situation. At this time, Mu Zi looked at Chu Xiu with a complicated gaze. Even she herself could not explain the emotions she was feeling. She only smiled at Chu Xiu and said, "I never thought that I would be able to see you again, young master." Mu Zi recognized Chu Xiu, but she was smart enough not to say Chu Xiu's name. Han Lei and Song Xiao looked at Mu Zi with astonishment. They had not seen Mu Zi smile for a long time. What was the relationship between Lin Yi and the young miss? Mu Zi turned to Han Lei and Song Xiao and said, "Uncle Han, Uncle Song, this young master is truly my benefactor. Can you let me be alone with him for a while? This mission is temporarily suspended." Han Lei and Song Xiao looked at each other and nodded. They immediately turned around and left the Taoist temple. They even walked several hundred zhang away from the Taoist temple to guard it. Once an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society received a mission, he had to complete it. This was a matter of principle. However, things like principles also depended on who it was placed on. If it was placed on the young miss, principles could also be put aside. Chu Xiu looked at Mu Zi, took off the mask on his face, and said, "How did you recognize me?" From his voice to his aura to his habits, etc., Chu Xiu had already changed everything. With his face covered, who would be able to recognize him for sure? In the end, this Mu Zi was able to recognize his true identity at a glance. This made Chu Xiu feel a little strange. The corner of Mu Zi's mouth curled into a smile and she said, "If I said it was a feeling, would you believe me, young Master Chu?" Chu Xiu paused and said, "Of course I believe it. A woman's feeling is sometimes very accurate." Mu Zi said in a faint voice, "Actually, it's not just a feeling. When a person disguises as another person, even if it's a different body, there will still be some parts that are very similar. I have a very deep impression of young Master Chu, so I was able to recognize you." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "If I remember correctly, I actually only met you once." Mu Zi stared at Chu Xiu and said, "Yes, it was only once. But young Master Chu, you are my benefactor, the benefactor who helped me take revenge for the extermination of my family, and even pulled me back from the depths of despair, so I will never forget you." Chu Xiu was slightly surprised, and he smiled and said, Actually, I am not a good person, it's not like I haven't done such things before. However, I still need to be a bit more honest. When I exterminated the Yu clan, it was only because of a mission, and you also took out something as a reward, so it can't be considered a favor. As for what I said to you, you listened to it, and being alive is your good fortune. If you can't get over it and die, then I'm sorry, I don't have the heart to save a dead person. Most of the time, Chu Xiu did things with a strong sense of utilitarianism. Just as he said, it was not like he had never done such things before. Although Chu Xiu didn't know what kind of opportunities Mu Zi had obtained all these years, 2 of the 4 great blood killers of the Blue Dragon Society were actually very respectful to her, calling her Miss, and even giving up his mission because of Mu Zi's words. Obviously, her identity was not ordinary. But because of this, Chu Xiu didn't try to fool Mu Zi, exaggerating the things that happened in the past, and so on. Just as he said, sometimes it was better to be kind, or else you might find out in the end that you were the one at a disadvantage. Just like Nie Donglu in the original plot, Lu Fengxian was already his good friend, but in the end, Nie Donglu turned a future strong friend into an enemy. As expected, after hearing Chu Xiu's words, Mu Zi's eyes immediately lit up. Chu Xiu was still the same Chu Xiu. Even in the midst of danger and pursuit, Chu Xiu still hadn't changed. Although the current Mu Zi was no longer the same as before, in her heart, Chu Xiu was still the lofty person who had casually destroyed the Yu clan with a psychological attack, helping her take revenge for her clan's extermination. If Chu Xiu were to force her to do something for him after seeing her relationship with the Azure Dragon Society, Mu Zi would definitely be disappointed, even if she agreed to do it for the sake of the kindness she had shown him in the past. Chu Xiu asked, "I'm very curious. What have you been doing all these years? You actually joined the Blue Dragon Society, and it seems that your position isn't low either." Actually, not only was Mu Zi's position not low, her current strength was not low either. Chu Xiu could feel that Mu Zi's cultivation was at the 5 Qis unification realm. Although compared to the current Chu Xiu, the 5 Qis unification realm was nothing, but according to Mu Zi's strength and her current age, it was already not easy. Mu Zi said softly, "The Yu clan was destroyed by you, young Master Chu, and I got my revenge. So, I decided to roam the pugilistic world alone. If I, a woman, want to establish a foothold in the pugilistic world, I have to be more ruthless than a man. Later, I accidentally met someone from the Blue Dragon Society. Because of you, I didn't have any ill feelings towards the Blue Dragon Society, so I prepared to join the Blue Dragon Society. However, at that time, young Master Chu had already fallen out with the Blue Dragon Society and left. The Heavenly Sin branch also changed to a new branch leader, so they started to clean up the old members of the Heavenly Sin branch. I was a newcomer, and my performance was outstanding, so I was recognized by the new branch leader. I was rewarded to go to the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society to cultivate for a period of time. During this period, I was also given pointers by the experts from the headquarters. At the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society, I got to know the second dragon head of the Blue Dragon Society, Duanmu Qianshan, and took him as my adoptive father. That's why I left the branch. Uncle Song and Uncle Han were personally brought up by my adoptive father, and they are loyal to him. That's why they listen to everything I say and call me Mississippi." Hearing Mu Zi's words, Chu Xiu was a little surprised. He didn't expect that Mu Zi would actually become Duanmu Qianshan's adoptive daughter. At the mention of the name Duanmu Qianshan, most people in the Jianghu were very unfamiliar with it. One reason was that the second dragon head of the Blue Dragon Society, Crescent Green Dragon Bu Tiannan, was too high profile. He was so high profile that he didn't seem like a killer at all. On the other hand, Duanmu Qianshan was very low-key, so low-key that he rarely showed his face in front of outsiders. Therefore, in the Jianghu, he wasn't even as famous as the dragon heads of the Blue Dragon Society. In fact, Duanmu Qianshan was very important to the Blue Dragon Society. It could even be said that Duanmu Qianshan was even more important to the Blue Dragon Society than the second dragon head, Bu Tiannan. For so many years, if Duanmu Qianshan hadn't stabilized the internal structure of the Blue Dragon Society, with Bu Tiannan's crazy way of doing things, even if the Blue Dragon Society wasn't destroyed by Bu Tiannan, it would have been torn apart. Chapter 535. As the second dragon head of the Blue Dragon Society, Duanmu Qianshan was not famous for his martial arts. Instead, he was famous for his brains. In fact, Duanmu Qianshan did not have much martial arts. He was only half a martial arts grandmaster. It was said that Duanmu Qianshan was half a martial arts grandmaster because he made a mistake when he was trying to break through to the true pellet realm, causing his true pellet to be destroyed. However, he did not die. Instead, he retained some of his strength. He was stronger than ordinary oneness of heaven and man realm martial artists, but not as strong as a grandmaster with a true pellet realm. Therefore, he was considered half a martial arts grandmaster. Of course, martial arts was just the icing on the cake for Duanmu Qianshan. What Duanmu Qianshan was really good at was not martial arts. Duanmu Qianshan was known as half a day's fortune teller. It meant that man's fortune teller was not as good as God's fortune teller. Duanmu Qianshan was a man, so naturally, he was not as good as God's fortune teller. However, he had half the strength of God's fortune teller. Therefore, he was known as half a day's fortune teller. His attainments in divination were comparable to those Taoist and Buddhist sect grandmasters who studied karma. Moreover, Duanmu Qianshan was not only good at divination, but he was also good at medicine, array, and other miscellaneous skills. In the Blue Dragon Society, although Butian-nan was the second dragon head, Duanmu Qianshan was in charge of 99% of the matters. Butian-nan did not understand those chores, and he was too lazy to bother himself with them. Therefore, in the Blue Dragon Society, Duanmu Qianshan's prestige was not inferior to Butian-nan's. If Duanmu Qianshan was not supporting the Blue Dragon Society, with Butian-nan's crazy personality, the Blue Dragon Society would have been torn apart by him. Moreover, Duanmu Qianshan was good at judging people. Many of the top killers in the Blue Dragon Society were discovered by Duanmu Qianshan. For example, Han Kuai and Song Xiao. Even Duanmu Qianshan was no match for the two of them when they joined forces. However, when they had just reached the physical invulnerability realm, Duanmu Qianshan had taken a liking to them at first glance. He had imparted martial arts to them based on their personalities and had given them pointers and support. Although Duanmu Qianshan's strength was not great, that was because his martial Dao aptitude was too poor. It was useless even if he had countless heaven and earth treasures to make up for it. However, his understanding and attainments in martial Dao were stronger than most martial Dao masters. It could be said that Duanmu Qianshan was the one who created Han Kuai and Song Xiao. That was why these two were so obedient to Duanmu Qianshan's adopted daughter, Mu Zi. To them, their first loyalty was to Duanmu Qianshan, followed by Butian-nan. The Azure Dragon Society could only be ranked third. After hearing this, Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Since you have become Duanmu Qianshan's daughter, why did you come to the Northern Yen? And Han Kuai and Song Xiao, these two are the top killers in the Blue Dragon Society, the four blood killers. Why did they come here to be branch leaders? Isn't this a waste?" The true elites of the Blue Dragon Society were not in the 36 Big Dipper divisions, but in the headquarters. Originally, the Sin branch leader came from the headquarters, but he was demoted to the Sin branch to be a branch leader. However, he always wanted to return to the headquarters. For Han Kuai and Song Xiao, with their strength, coming to the Northern Yen to be a branch leader was definitely a demotion. Mu Zi smiled bitterly and shook her head. "It's because my adoptive father offended the great dragon head and is now in seclusion as punishment. Because Uncle Song and Uncle Han are my adoptive father's people, they were also demoted to the Northern Yen." With that, Mu Zi told Chu Xiu everything that had happened in the Blue Dragon Society. She did not hide anything. The great dragon head of the Blue Dragon Society, Crescent Green Dragon, Butian-nan, was very famous in the pugilistic world. However, he was arrogant and willful. In the past, because the Blue Dragon Society's Sin branch was destroyed, this bastard actually went to the Great Light Temple and fought with the seat of Delusion Zen Hall's 9 Wonders Dragon Tree, Su Yun. He directly put on a stance that said he would not rest until one of them died, and actually forced the Great Light Temple to stop. This matter was quite famous. However, from Duanmu Qianshan's point of view, it was fine for Butian-nan to go crazy once in a while. However, if Butian-nan went crazy every time, it would only put the Blue Dragon Society in danger. Mu Zi shook her head and said, "Adoptive father told me that the great dragon head is a little too arrogant and can't see itself clearly. Not long ago, the great dragon head actually went to provoke the Vermilion Bird Pavilion of Western Chu, which doesn't have much of a grudge against the Blue Dragon Society. This caused both sides to become enemies, and the great dragon head also revealed that the Blue Dragon Society wants to expand. the Blue Dragon Society had been passed down for so many years. As long as they were a sword in the hands of the pugilistic world, then as long as there were disputes and killings in the pugilistic world, the Blue Dragon Society would continue to exist. But now, according to the Great Dragon Head, the Blue Dragon Society shouldn't just be a sword in the hands of others, but a sword wielder. Adoptive father's meaning was that if the Blue Dragon Society wanted to be a sword wielder, it was fine. However, with the many people that the Blue Dragon Society had killed over the years, the Blue Dragon Society needed to have the strength to wield the sword. Otherwise, the Blue Dragon Society would be suppressed by the majority of the pugilistic world. And the current Blue Dragon Society clearly didn't have this kind of strength. During the discussion at the headquarters, the Great Dragon Head and Adoptive Father started to quarrel over this matter. Even the people who supported the Great Dragon Head and Adoptive Father were arguing, and it almost turned into an internal fight. For the sake of the Blue Dragon Society's future, Adoptive Father could only take the initiative to retreat. However, in the end, he was stripped of most of his power by the Great Dragon Head and was ordered to reflect on his mistakes. As for the powerful assassins in the headquarters like Uncle Han and Uncle Song, they were demoted to other places. Adoptive Father was worried that I wouldn't be safe in the headquarters, so he let me follow Uncle Han and Uncle Song to Northern Yen. With the two of them around, even if a martial arts grandmaster were to make a move, they would be able to protect me. After hearing Mu Ziyi's words, Chu Xiu really didn't expect such a big change to happen in the Blue Dragon Society. However, the Blue Dragon Society's matter was generally a power struggle. No one was right or wrong. Duanmu Qinshan's suggestion was right for the current Blue Dragon Society. The Blue Dragon Society was an assassin organization. The righteous path could use it, the demonic path could use it, you could use it, and I could also use it. Therefore, as long as the Blue Dragon Society didn't go too far, the people of the pugilistic world could tolerate it. After all, everyone knew that as long as there were grudges and killings in the pugilistic world, even if the Blue Dragon Society didn't exist, there would still be the White Dragon Society and the Black Dragon Society. However, if the Blue Dragon Society revealed its ambition to expand, then based on the people the Blue Dragon Society had killed over the years and the karma they had sown, it wouldn't be wrong to say that they would become the enemy of the whole world. The moon-worshipping cult was a big sect of the demonic path. Why did they openly become neighbors with the Longhu Mountain Celestial Master Mansion? It was all because of the peerless expert Yi Xiaonan. The entire moon-worshipping cult had countless experts. Many people in the pugilistic world knew that the Yinma clan still had the beautiful dream of reviving the Kunlun Devil cult. Why didn't they go all out to kill the Yinma clan? It was because there were still some old monsters in the Yinma clan who hadn't died yet. Once they were forced into a life and death struggle, it would also set off a storm in the pugilistic world. Therefore, everything in this world depended on strength. The Blue Dragon Society wasn't weak, but they didn't have the qualifications to fight against so many enemies. Therefore, Duanmu Qinshan's suggestion was right for the long term of the Blue Dragon Society. But at the same time, what Bu Tiannan did wasn't wrong. He was the Great Dragon Head, and he was the true leader of the Blue Dragon Society. In the end, his plan was criticized to be worthless. Even so, there were so many people in the Blue Dragon Society who supported Duanmu Qinshan despite his status as the Great Dragon Head. It would be strange if Bu Tiannan wasn't afraid. Moreover, this time, Bu Tiannan only chose to deprive Duanmu Qinshan of his power and suppress his subordinates. In Chu Xiu's opinion, this was already considered restraint. If it were Chu Xiu himself, if he had a subordinate like Duanmu Qinshan who was known as the Second Dragon Head, but his actual power had already threatened the existence of the Great Dragon Head, Chu Xiu reckoned that he would have already killed someone and cleaned up the place. Mu Ziyi paused for a moment before continuing. By the way, young Master Chu, the Heavenly Sin Branch leader who tried to harm you in the past was recognized by the Grand Dragon Head because he killed someone from the White Tiger Hall. He was rewarded with a lot of medicinal pills and cultivation methods. He also used this opportunity to step into the Martial Dao Grandmaster realm and become one of the 5 dragon heads of our Green Dragon Society. The Sin Branch leader's real name is Duan Tian Lang. He's despicable, shameless, and cunning. He doesn't stand on any side for his own benefit. Before he became a Martial Dao Grandmaster, he wanted to seek refuge with my adoptive father. However, my adoptive father could see that he was up to no good and didn't accept him. He even taught him that the Blue Dragon Society only cares about strength. In the end, after he became a Martial Dao Grandmaster, this person changed his stance and encouraged the Great Dragon Head to act recklessly and speak ill of my godfather. Now that the great dragon head has become like this, Duan Tianlang is partly to blame. Chu Xiu was really surprised to hear news about the Xin branch leader, Duan Tianlang. However, he didn't forget about Duan Tianlang. Chu Xiu had always been a narrow-minded person. Chu Xiu had to find a chance to avenge the enmity back then. As for Duan Tianlang's current achievements, Chu Xiu wasn't that surprised. Back when Duan Tianlang was the Xin branch leader, his strength had already reached the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm. Now that he had the resources, it wouldn't be difficult for him to step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. Moreover, this Duan Tianlang was indeed unscrupulous. Back then, for the sake of the blood jade exquisite treasure, he did not even hesitate to sacrifice Chu Xiu and other talented subordinates. To him, as long as he could obtain the treasure, sacrificing the entire heavenly Xin branch would not be a problem. This person only cared about his own interests and had no principles to speak of. It wasn't surprising that he would do such a thing now. As for the messy affairs of the Blue Dragon Society, Mu Zi didn't hide it from Chu Xiu. Knowing that Chu Xiu was in danger now, Mu Zi said directly, "Young Master Chu, the morgue doesn't have many people to hunt you down now. After your last battle, I don't think anyone below the martial Dao Grandmaster level will dare to come and court death." Therefore, the morgue paid a huge sum of money to hire the Blue Dragon Society. Now, you can disguise yourself as a member of the Blue Dragon Society and leave Northern Yen. Even if the morgue intercepts you, they won't dare to investigate the Blue Dragon Society. Chapter 536. Rules were dead, but people were alive. There was no rule in this world that couldn't be broken. Even the strict rules of the Blue Dragon Society could be broken as long as no one investigated. Mu Zi was Duanmu Qianshan's adopted daughter. Han Ku and Song Xiao were raised by Duanmu Qianshan. Now that Mu Zi wanted to help release Chu Xiu, the two didn't have any objections. Instead, they did their best to help. Chu Xiu didn't stand on ceremony with Mu Zi. He really needed to return to the Guanzhong torture room to heal his primordial spirit. Therefore, under Mu Zi's arrangement, Chu Xiu disguised himself as a member of the Blue Dragon Society. Han Ku and Song Xiao escorted him safely out of Northern Yen. As for the Blue Dragon Society's reply to the Morgue village, it was even simpler. They didn't kill Lin Yi and let him escape. If the Morgue village doesn't revoke the bounty, we'll continue to hunt him down. If the Morgue village revokes the bounty, it doesn't matter. In any case, in the entire Northern Yen, Han Ku and Song Xiao had the highest status. No one dared to snitch on them. At the border of Northern Yen and Guanzhong, Mu Zi looked at Chu Xiu and softly said, "Young master, have a safe journey." Mu Zi didn't know how she felt about Chu Xiu. Perhaps it was gratitude? Or something else? Mu Zi only knew that before she had acknowledged Duanmu Qianshan as her adoptive father, when she was fighting in the Jianghu, whenever she encountered a situation where she could not hold on, she would always remember what Chu Xiu had told her. You can't just live a life of death. Chu Xiu took off the Blue Dragon Society mask and handed it to Mu Zi and said, "I saved you in the past. Now you save me. You don't have to keep it in your heart. However, Miss Mu, your adopted father's situation in Blue Dragon Society isn't very optimistic. If there are any problems, you can come find me." With that said, Chu Xiu turned and left. Mu Zi looked at Chu Xiu's back with a strange look in her eyes. Chu Xiu saved her in the past. Now she helped Chu Xiu. Although it seemed like the past had been settled, to Mu Zi, she still couldn't forget Chu Xiu. In the past, Chu Xiu had saved her in her hour of need. He had given her hope when she was at her most desperate. Now that she helped Chu Xiu, it could only be considered as the icing on the cake at most. Han Lei and Song Xiao didn't know Chu Xiu's identity, but Mu Zi knew that even if Han Lei and Song Xiao joined forces, the chances of them defeating Chu Xiu were not high. Although the two of them had the record of killing a martial Dao Grandmaster together, only they knew how dangerous that battle was. On the other hand, Chu Xiu was an existence that killed a martial Dao Grandmaster alone. Therefore, even without her help, it wasn't impossible for Chu Xiu to kill his way out by himself. At this moment, Song Xiao and Han Lei stood behind Mu Zi and looked at her with a strange look in their eyes. When Duanmu Qianshan took Mu Zi in as his adopted daughter, the main reason was because of her tenacity. It was as if she couldn't be cut down no matter what. Mu Zi's hardships in cultivating in the Blue Dragon Society, and her decisiveness in carrying out missions made many men blush with shame. Therefore, Han Lei and Song Xiao were very surprised that Mu Zi would show such a hesitant expression to a man. Song Xiao said, "Miss, actually, it's fine if you like this Lin Yi. His identity is worthy of you. He's an elite of the Lurking Devil clan. Although he can't be seen most of the time, he still has strength and status. If you marry him, Lord Duanmu will also gain the support of the Lurking Devil clan." After a moment of silence, Mu Zi shook her head and said, "Uncle Song, don't tease me. You know that's not what I meant. Moreover, you don't know him. Something like a marriage alliance is not attractive to him." Han Lei and Song Xiao only knew about Lin Yi, but they didn't know that Chu Xiu and Lin Yi were the same person. Being ranked 4th on the Longhu leaderboard, Chu Xiu's status was only second to the likes of Zhang Qingzhen and Zhong Xian. If nothing unexpected happened, Chu Xiu would definitely become a powerful figure in the pugilistic world in the future. For an existence like Chu Xiu, something like a marriage alliance was indeed not attractive. After pausing for a moment, Mu Zi said, "Uncle Han, Uncle Song, let's go. We can just brush off the Blue Dragon Society. The main thing is, we have to pay attention to foster father's side at all times." Han Lei and Song Xiao nodded their heads with a serious look on their faces. For the current Green Dragon Society, they were indeed in a very tricky situation. Even an outsider like Chu Xiu who only knew the general situation could see that the atmosphere in the Blue Dragon Society was not right, let alone the members of the Blue Dragon Society. Therefore, they didn't know how things would develop next. They could only take it one step at a time. After a few days, Chu Xiu had already left the northern Yan land and returned to Guangzhou. The Morgue village didn't send anyone to continue the chase. This wasn't because Nie Renlong had vented his anger, but because the people of the Morgue village thought that they had spent a lot of money to get Han Lei and Song Xiao to deal with Chu Xiu so they could save some energy and wait for Chu Xiu's death. However, at this time, Chu Xiu had already returned to the Guangzhou torture room. The first thing he did was to secretly contact Mei Qinglian. Previously, it was Mei Qinglian who took the initiative to find him, but this time, it was Chu Xiu who personally went to find Mei Qinglian instead of Chu Xiu. In her room, Mei Qinglian was surprised to see Chu Xiu appear. She asked, "How did you get out of the Morgue manor and the encirclement of so many rogue cultivators so quickly?" Chu Xiu bluntly sat in front of Mei Qinglian and said, "I naturally have my own methods. However, Saintess, you've made me miserable this time. Being chased for thousands of miles doesn't feel good." Mei Qinglian spread her hands and said, "You can't blame me for this. Who knew that hypocrite Nie Renlong would care so much about his son? When Nie Donglu was killed by you, he went crazy. I also found 2 people to pick you up before. One of them is an acquaintance of yours, the 9 abandonment sword, Sheng Tianyao of the Northern Yan royal family. He had a conflict with the Morgue village because of you last time. If he saves you this time, he can pretend to have a conflict with the Morgue village again and then save you indirectly. As for me, I secretly informed that kid Lu Jin and told him to receive you. That kid recently stepped into the real pellet state of martial Dao, and he is considered to be the real upper echelon of the phaseless demon sect. At this time, he is very arrogant, and he wants to find someone to test his skills. I simply let him go to Northern Yan. These 2 people, one in the open and one in the dark, should not be a problem to bring you out of Northern Yan, but I didn't expect you to come back quietly." Lu Jin was Mr. Lu of the phaseless demon sect. When Chu Xiu saw Mr. Lu last time, Mr. Lu was already half a step into the real pellet state. It was not surprising that Mr. Lu was promoted to the martial Dao Grandmaster at this time. Chu Xiu didn't feel angry about Mei Qinglian's explanation. Demonic Dao was not the right way, and its development itself was very cruel. If you have the ability and value, I will protect you and protect you. On the contrary, even if you die, no one will care about you. Between Chu Xiu and the Hidden Demon Clan, the meaning of the transaction was much stronger than the inheritance. How much reputation and benefits he could bring to the Hidden Demon Clan, the Hidden Demon Clan would also give Chu Xiu something. Including the matter of Pang Hu this time, it was actually a transaction. If it was done well, Chu Xiu would be rewarded. If it was messed up, then you are useless. This time, Chu Xiu actually succeeded. Qilian village was saved, and Ju Yi Manor was half destroyed. It was just that there were some accidents that caused Chu Xiu to fall into it. Therefore, Mei Qinglian could send 2 martial Dao grandmasters to save Chu Xiu, which was already extremely benevolent. Chu Xiu never imagined that Mei Qinglian would come to save him regardless of the risk of exposing her identity. This was right with Chu Xiu's own speculation. Even if the hidden demon clan really sent someone to pick him up, he had to support himself in the blank time in the middle. It was better to rely on oneself than others. It was more reliable to kill his way out. Therefore, for Mei Qinglian's explanation, Chu Xiu just nodded and didn't say much. Mei Qinglian might have realized that she had indeed miscalculated this time. It wasn't a problem to send Chu Xiu, but she didn't arrange a way out in advance. If Mei Qinglian had informed Shang Tianyao in advance, perhaps there wouldn't be so much trouble. After all, this matter was Mei Qinglian's own matter, not the entire hidden demon clan's. Now that there was a problem, Mei Qinglian also felt a little embarrassed. Mei Qinglian coughed and said, "Well, this matter is indeed partly my responsibility. I originally wanted to give you something, but now I can't bring it out. I should change it to something else, but this thing is not in my hands. I can only try my best to help you fight for it. Whether you can get it or not depends on the final development." Hearing Mei Qinglian's words, Chu Xiu was interested. He asked, "What is it?" Mei Qinglian knocked on the table with her slender fingers and said, "It's a qualification to enter Xiaofan." Xiaofan? Is it an ancient relic or a secret land? Chu Xiu asked. Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, "I don't know whether that place is a relic or a secret land. Some people even say that it's a world. However, the existence of Xiaofan is related to the ancient tribulation. That place only appeared after the ancient tribulation. There are countless relics and secret lands in it, as well as countless luck and opportunities. By the way, I remember that you have several great compassion poems of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang. Tell me, how many great compassion poems have you collected?" Chu Xiu pondered for a moment, but still told the truth. 5. Mei Qinglian's eyes revealed a trace of astonishment. "I didn't expect that you would actually be able to quietly gather all 5 great compassion poems. I reckon that in the history of Jianghu, you are the one who has gathered the most great compassion poems. But do you know where the source of the great compassion poems of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang is? It's in this Xiaofan. If you can enter it, maybe you can collect the complete version of the great compassion poems of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang." Chapter 537. This was the first time Chu Xiu had heard of this little mortal world. He had never heard of these 3 words before. However, judging from Mei Qinglian's attitude, it was obvious that this place was extraordinary. Moreover, Mei Qinglian said that this place could allow Chu Xiu to gather the sorrowful poem of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang. This indeed tempted Chu Xiu. Heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang great compassion fu was a powerful demonic art. No one knew how powerful it was because no one had ever collected all of it. However, according to other people's speculations, its lower limit was 9 transformations. After gathering all of it, this cultivation technique might reach the level of a supreme cultivation technique or a peerless cultivation technique. Seeing Chu Xiu's expression, Mei Qinglian smiled and said, "If it's just this, then I don't need to be so cautious." The existence of Xiaofan Tian wasn't a secret to the top of the pugilistic world. It was just that the conditions to enter were very harsh. However, there were countless opportunities inside. Ever since the ancient calamity, Xiaofan Tian had appeared. Countless people had entered it, but no one had explored it completely. My holy sect's supreme Dugu had entered before. After coming out, he created a peerless demonic cultivation technique that shocked the heavens and earth. Chunyang Dao sect's immortal Aning Xuanji had also entered and comprehended the Tianji celestial technique. His cultivation was extremely high. This was far away. There was moon-worshipping sect's Yi Shaonan. After entering Xiaofan Tian, he finally completed the Mend Heaven Heart Sutra that he had painstakingly cultivated for decades. There was also World Alliance's Chen Qingdi who had honed his unparalleled fist intent to the peak in Xiaofan Tian. In short, this was a very mystical place. After entering it, one wouldn't have a 100% chance to soar into the sky, but it could provide a stepping stone for one to soar into the sky. Whether one could take advantage of this opportunity to soar into the sky would depend on one's own strength and luck. Xiaofan Tian opened once every 30 years. The location of the opening was different every time. Other than the first 6 hours, one could enter at will. At other times, one needed a specific key to enter. So, if you want to enter Xiaofan Tian, you can only rely on the illusory luck and the key. These keys are controlled by the top sex and some experts in the pugilistic world. There are very few scattered in the pugilistic world. Chu Xiu asked, Saintess has the key? Mei Qinglian rolled her eyes and said, If I had the key, do you think I would give it to you? With the power of my Yin demon sect in the past, I naturally have keys and not just one. However, my Yin demon sect has experienced great changes in the past, and I'm the only one left. The keys have long since been taken away. I said that I could help you get the key to Xiaofan Tian. I was referring to the key of Guanzhong torture room. Don't think that Guanzhong torture room's current strength is remarkable, but the favors and connections left behind by Chu Kuanga are beyond your imagination. Now, Guan Siyu has 3 keys in her hands, all left behind by Chu Kuanga. Under normal circumstances, only 3 people from the Guanzhong disciplinary hall will enter the minor mortal heaven this time. They are Guan Siyu, the second-in-command of the punishment division, Feng Sha, and the great commander that you haven't seen before, 5 Law Sword, and Lionian. At the mention of Lionian's name, killing intent flashed in Mei Qinglian's eyes. Previously, Mei Qinglian had said that if it weren't for the few leaders of the punishment division, she could have controlled Guanzhong torture room long ago. Feng Sha and Lionian were the biggest obstacles in front of Mei Qinglian. Mei Qinglian said, With my current identity, I can't fight for the key to Xiaofan Tian. I can't enter, but you can. It's not long before Xiaofan Tian opens. Recuperate during this period of time. I'll try my best to talk to Guan Siyu and get him to give you a key. You've just entered Unity of Heaven and Man, so it's unrealistic that you can become a martial Dao Grandmaster just by entering Xiaofan Tian. However, I can guarantee that if you can obtain some similar opportunities, you'll at least be able to build a good foundation for you to become a martial Dao Grandmaster. Chu Xiu nodded when he heard that. If Xiaofan Tian was really that miraculous, then his injuries this time were worth it. Since that's the case, I'll go back to recuperate and wait for the Saintess' good news. With that, Chu Xiu left. His priority now was to recuperate from the injuries on his primordial spirit. Otherwise, even if he obtained the opportunity to enter Xiaofan Tian this time, he wouldn't be able to unleash his greatest strength. Only a few of Chu Xiu's confidants knew that he had gone to Northern Yen. Everyone else in Guanxi thought that Chu Xiu was still in closed-door cultivation. When Chu Xiu returned to Guanxi, the first person he went to find was none other than Lu Fengxian. Previously, Lu Fengxian was also in closed-door cultivation to cultivate the 9 Heavens Fiend Golden Body and the Demon God Unparalleled Halberd. But he had already come out of closed-door cultivation and noticed that Chu Xiu wasn't around. However, Lu Fengxian wasn't a talkative person. Even though he noticed that Chu Xiu wasn't around, he didn't say much. At this time, seeing Chu Xiu's appearance, Lu Fengxian immediately noticed that Chu Xiu was abnormal. Brother Chu, are you injured? Chu Xiu nodded. Shen Jiuyo, who was with Lu Fengxian, interrupted. Chu Xiu, you're really unlucky this time. The foundation of your primordial spirit was injured. This kind of injury isn't easy to heal no matter where it is. As one of the 4 generals under Marquis Lu Wenho in the past, Shen Jiuyo was good at primordial spirit secret methods. At this time, he immediately saw through Chu Xiu's background. These 4 people had recovered some of their cultivation during this period of time, and they even reached the 3-flower realm. However, Shen Jiuyo and the others' attitude toward Chu Xiu was far inferior to that of Lu Fengxian. From the way the 4 of them saw it, Lu Fengxian had obtained Marquis Lu's inheritance, which meant that she was the second successor of Marquis Lu. She was their master. What was Chu Xiu? Even though he had a good relationship with Lu Fengxian and was best friends, Shen Jiuyo and the others still treated Chu Xiu with arrogance. They were also a little dissatisfied that Lu Fengxian had given the 9 Heavens Fiend Golden Body to Chu Xiu. Lu Fengxian frowned slightly. This seemed to be the most serious injury Chu Xiu had ever suffered since he met Chu Xiu. It even hurt his foundation. Brother Chu, what are you going to do? It just so happens that Divine Dr. Feng is in Guanxi now. I'll take you to see him. Chu Xiu nodded and said, That's what I was thinking. Lin Ye's mental strength was severely injured, and now Chu Xiu, who had been in seclusion, was also severely injured. This kind of thing was too much of a coincidence, and it was easy for people to think of something. Chu Xiu did not trust Feng Buping, but he trusted Lu Fengxian. With Lu Fengxian's important relationship, Feng Buping had no reason to reveal this matter. Moreover, this was the land of Guanxi, Chu Xiu's territory. Even if Feng Buping had any other intentions, he could not cause any trouble. In the medical center of Guanxi's Jianzhou prefecture, Feng Buping's hand seeped into Chu Xiu's body to check on Chu Xiu's injuries. Feng Buping had been in Guanxi for a while. Compared to when he was in the Valley of the Dead, it was actually more convenient for him to be in Guanxi. In this small area of Guanzhong, the Guanzhong torture hall was a great deterrent. Chu Xiu helped Feng Buping open such a medical center in Jianzhou prefecture, and there were also the Zhonghu constables of the Guanzhong torture room to maintain order here. It was much more convenient than when Feng Buping was in the Valley of the Dead. Therefore, when Lu Fengxian brought Chu Xiu for treatment, Feng Buping immediately pushed away the martial artists who were queuing outside and gave priority to treating Chu Xiu. Of course, Lu Fengxian played a part in this, but the main reason was that Feng Buping was now in Chu Xiu's territory. Feng Buping had a strange temper, but he was not an idiot. Of course, he knew who was protecting him now. Sensing the foundation of Chu Xiu's spirit was damaged, Feng Buping's expression changed slightly. Previously in the northern Yan, Lin Ye's matter caused an uproar. Everyone in the Zhonghu knew about this. And Chu Xiu was punished to face the wall. Everyone in the Guanzhong torture room knew about this. Feng Buping had never heard that facing the wall could cause damage to one's spirit, or even cause damage to one's foundation. There was clearly something wrong with this. However, Feng Buping didn't say anything. He just pretended not to notice. He didn't care who Chu Xiu was or what secrets he had. He only knew that Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian were good friends, and he was still living in Chu Xiu's territory. That was enough. Sometimes, it was better to be muddle-headed. Don't say what you shouldn't say. Don't see what you shouldn't see. When Feng Buping stopped, Lu Fengxian quickly asked, "Divine Dr. Feng, how is Brother Chu?" Feng Buping took a deep breath and said, "Official Chu's situation isn't very optimistic. It has already damaged the foundation of his spirit. Although I can heal this kind of injury, with my current ability, it will leave a hidden danger, which will affect the growth of his spirit in the future." Lu Fengxian frowned. She knew that Chu Xiu was good at spirit mystic arts, but now Chu Xiu's spirit was injured, which was equivalent to cutting off Chu Xiu's future cultivation path of spirit mystic arts. However, Chu Xiu didn't mind. This group of medical practitioners were all the same. They never said anything that was certain. So Chu Xiu just asked indifferently, "Is there a way to make up for this kind of hidden danger?" Feng Buping nodded and said, "There is, but the conditions are a bit harsh. The simplest is official Chu. You can step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm within 2 years. At that time, your injury hasn't stabilized. You can use the world's essence Qi to cleanse your foundation when advancing to the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. The second is official Chu. You can find some secret arts that specialize in repairing spirit, but this kind of secret art is the rarest, even rarer than offensive and defensive secret arts. The third is that Lord Chu is able to find 9 revolution spirit herbs that are specifically targeted at the primordial spirit. Consuming and refining them will also be effective." Lu Fengxian's brows furrowed even deeper after hearing Feng Buping's explanation. Because every single one of those 3 conditions was extremely harsh. Chapter 538. In Lu Fengxian's opinion, the 3 points that Feng Buping proposed were somewhat unreliable. It was difficult to find a secret method that could repair the spirit, and it was even more difficult to find a 9 revolution level spirit medicine. As for becoming a martial Dao Grandmaster in 2 years, probably no one in the entire Zhonghu would dare to boast about it. Being a martial Dao Grandmaster was different from other realms. It needed to be comprehended. Once you had an epiphany, you could merge with heaven and earth, condense the true core, and enter the Grandmaster realm. But if you couldn't comprehend it, it was very likely that you would be stuck in the unity of heaven and man realm for the rest of your life. There were many martial artists in the Zhonghu who had reached the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm a long time ago. They were only half a step away from becoming a martial Dao Grandmaster, but in the end, they couldn't take that half step for their entire lives. Although Lu Fengxian was confident in Chu Xiu and believed that Chu Xiu would definitely become a martial Dao Grandmaster in the future, 2 years was a little too fast. However, Chu Xiu seemed very indifferent at this time. He directly waved his hand and said, "Divine Dr. Feng, treat according to what you said. As for the hidden danger, we'll talk about it later." Not to mention whether he could become a martial Dao Grandmaster in 2 years, he might encounter some opportunities in Xiaofan heaven this time. Instead of worrying about how to eliminate the hidden danger in his spirit, it was better to look forward first. Feng Buping nodded, took out things such as the formation plate and golden needles, and began to repair Chu Xiu's spirit. The biggest difference between the divine doctor of the Jianghu and ordinary doctors was that they could use more means, and they could even use all kinds of tricks that you couldn't think of to treat your injuries. Feng Buping's reputation was not just for show. If Chu Xiu relied on himself to heal his injuries, it was estimated that he wouldn't be able to recover to the peak in a year and a half. However, with Feng Buping, Chu Xiu only used less than 10 days to restore his spirit to the peak state, but the hidden danger was still there. Now, if Chu Xiu didn't eliminate the hidden danger, his attainments in spirit could only stay at this level forever. After more than 20 days, Chu Xiu was still cultivating in seclusion, and Yuqi personally came to inform him to go to the main hall for a discussion. This time, even Yuqi found it very strange, because his master didn't say why he was looking for Chu Xiu. From Yuqi's point of view, Chu Xiu had been in seclusion all this time and did not seem to have caused any trouble. Could it be that the meeting this time was about something big related to the Guanzhong torture room? Why did he have to hide it from him? Chu Xiu had more or less guessed that Mei Qinglian had successfully convinced Guan Siyu. Otherwise, the Guanzhong torture room would only have 3 places to enter Xiafanshan, and all 3 Wu Dao grandmasters would have gone. Why would they need to ask Chu Xiu for help? After stepping into the torture chamber's headquarters, Xiao Yi and the other 3 disciplinary officers were all there. Apart from Yin Batong, Xiao Yi and Chu Simo took the initiative to greet Chu Xiu. In fact, Xiao Yi and the others were a little puzzled. They did not know why Guan Siyu had asked them to come. The few of them were in the Guanzhong torture room's upper echelons, and they knew some things about Xiafanshan. However, they had never imagined that they would be able to enter it. It was true that the Guanzhong torture room had extra keys, but they were reserved for the 3 martial Dao grandmasters. Some large sects with deep heritage could give the keys to some of the younger generation martial art practitioners, allowing them to enter and search for their own opportunities. However, it was clear that their Guanzhong disciplinary hall was not so extravagant as to do so. After a while, the 3 leaders of the punishment division walked into the hall together. This time, the 3rd leader, Si Ming, did not follow behind Guan Siyu. Instead, he entered with the other 2 leaders. This was Chu Xiu's first time meeting the big leader of the punishment division, An Lionian. An Lionian was a tall and skinny middle-aged man. His skin was pale and sickly, and his eyes were sunken, giving him a sinister look. His entire body was shrouded in a black robe, and he carried 5 swords on his back. However, they were wrapped in ordinary scabbards, making it impossible to tell what they were. And Lionian kept a very low profile, to the point that very few people in the outside world had heard of his name. Even the people in the Guanzhong torture room did not know who he was. In fact, the people in charge of most of the affairs in the punishment division were the 2nd leader, Feng Sha, and the 3rd leader, Si Ming. As the big leader, he was often elusive, and no one knew what he was up to. Chu Xiu did not know much about An Lionian previously, but he had obtained information about him from Mei Qinglian. It was no wonder that Guan Siyu was unable to make the punishment division completely obey his orders, given her current strength. An Lionian's seniority was just too high. In theory, he was even 1 generation older than Guan Siyu. Back when Chu Kuanga had still been around, An Lionian had been colleagues with Chu Kuanga. The 2 of them had fought for the position of the Guanzhong torture room's hall master. However, Chu Kuanga's advantage had been too obvious back then. As long as one was not blind, everyone would know who the hall master position should have been. Therefore, even if An Lionian had wanted to fight for it, he could not have one. In the end, he had taken the initiative to give up the position. Later on, Chu Kuanga had died unexpectedly. Logically speaking, the position should have been An Lionian's turn. However, Chu Kuanga felt that An Lionian's character was a little extreme and gloomy, and he would easily go to extremes. It was fine for him to be in charge of the punishment division, but it would not be appropriate for him to be in charge of the entire Guanzhong torture room. Therefore, he had given the position to Guan Siyu. And Lionian had been a little unconvinced and uncooperative with Guan Siyu in the early days. After all, Guan Xiyu had been a junior to him back then, and she had stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm later than him. What right did she have to make him bow down to her? However, Guan Xiyu had displayed her strength later on and even led the Guanzhong torture room to its current status. Guan Xiyu's prestige in the Guanzhong torture room grew, so An Liuyan had no choice but to be unconvinced. However, although An Liuyan had given up on fighting with Guan Xiyu for the position of Hall Master, the punishment division was still his territory. As long as An Liuyan was around, the punishment division had to be in his hands. He could ignore it, but Guan Xiyu could not do anything to the punishment division without his permission. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes as he looked at An Liuyan. He thought to himself that Guan Xiyu was still more concerned about the overall situation. She was afraid that she would cause damage to the Guanzhong torture room, so she did not choose to fight An Liuyan to the end. However, this was only because of Guan Xiyu. If it were him, Chu Xiu would not be able to tolerate having such a powerhouse under him who did not listen to his orders. In order to fend off foreign aggression, one must first pacify internal affairs. If one could not even clench one's fist tightly, what could one use to fight against outsiders? After almost everyone had arrived, Guan Xiyu walked in with Mei Qinglian a while later. Logically speaking, this was an internal meeting of the Guanzhong torture room. Although Mei Qinglian was Guan Xiyu's wife, she was ultimately an outsider. It was inappropriate for her to appear on such an occasion. However, Xiao Yi and the others acted as if they did not see it and did not say anything. This was not the first time Guan Xiyu had done something like this, and they were already used to it. If they spoke now, they would only offend Guan Xiyu. They would not be so foolish as to speak out of turn. However, An Liuyan said in a slightly hoarse voice, "Guan Xiyu, why did you bring a woman here for a meeting of the torture division? You have been a hall master for a few years and are used to being flattered by others. Have you become so arrogant that you have even forgotten your own surname?" Everyone present immediately felt a chill in their hearts. The air seemed to be filled with the strong smell of gunpowder. Guan Xiyu and An Liuyan had rarely met over the years, because whenever they did, such a situation would inevitably occur. Guan Xiyu was very tolerant and considered the overall situation, but An Liuyan was extremely indignant that Guan Xiyu had become a hall master. Therefore, he had never addressed Guan Xiyu as hall master all these years. Guan Xiyu pulled Mei Qinglian to sit down and said coldly, "So what if it is a meeting of the torture division? The rules of the torture division do not stipulate that women are not allowed to participate. If the rules really don't allow it, then I will change the rules. Now, I am the hall master." Chu Xiu glanced at Guan Xiyu in surprise. Hall Master Guan is rarely so domineering. Is it because his woman is next to him this time, so he is unyielding for once? Of course, Guan Xiyu also had the qualifications to be unyielding. Not to mention anything else, at least in the battle between Guan Xiyu and Xiahou Zhen, Guan Xiyu's magical power 9 changes directly crushed Xiahou Zhen. From this point, it could be seen that Guan Xiyu's cultivation was definitely not that simple. Although he had not reached the true fire spirit refinement state, he was definitely considered an outstanding talent in the martial Dao real pellet state. An Liuyan snorted coldly, "Why did you call everyone here?" Guan Xiyu said solemnly, "Of course, it is to discuss who can enter Xiaofan heaven." An Liuyan frowned when he heard this. What is there to discuss about this kind of thing? My Guanzhong torture room has a total of 3 keys left over from generation to generation. It just so happens that all 3 of us can enter. Guan Xiyu said, "I know there are only 3 keys, but I am not going to let all 3 of us enter. I need to leave one person to guard the Guanzhong torture room. Xiaofan heaven only opens once every 30 years. The last time we opened our Guanzhong torture room, there was only 1 key. It was Sir Chu Kuanga who entered it when he was young. The Guanzhong torture room is guarded by the old hall master. Although our Guanzhong torture hall is not in the chaotic situation of being besieged on all sides, for the sake of insurance, it is safer to leave someone to guard the place." Upon hearing this, An Liuyan and Feng Sha's expressions changed slightly. Guan Xiyu was the hall master, so he definitely had to go, so between An Liuyan and Feng Sha, one of them couldn't go. But Xiaofan heaven only opened once every 30 years, and this could be said to be their only chance. In the last 30 years, Feng Sha was still a martial artist of the younger generation, so he was not qualified to enter. An Liuyan was not a martial Dao grandmaster at that time, and he was not as good as Chu Kuanga, so he was not qualified either. If they did not enter the minor mortal sky this time, then in the next 30 years, and Liuyan and Feng Sha would no longer be in their prime. Even if they entered and obtained any fortuitous encounters or treasures, the effects would be greatly reduced. Chapter 539. As soon as Guan Siyu finished speaking, the atmosphere in the entire discussion hall became strange. And Liuyan said coldly, "Guan Siyu, who are you going to let stay and who are you going to let go?" Guan Siyu said solemnly, "Let Feng Sha stay. He is the second leader of the punishment division. He has been cooperating with everyone for a long time. His status and strength are enough. He is just right to stay in the punishment hall." Chu Xiu was one of the people who were going. This time, when the small mortal heaven opened, the various sects would definitely focus on bringing their younger generation disciples. Chu Xiu is now ranked 4th on the Longhu list. If Little Celestial Master Zhang Qingzhen, Wisdom King Zhong Xian, Chief Sword, Feng Qi Shao and others all go, but Chu Xiu doesn't go, what will the people of the underworld think of our Guanzhong torture room? Doesn't this mean that our Guanzhong torture room doesn't value the young disciples? Upon hearing this, Feng Sha's face turned black. Only focusing on the younger generation disciples. But I, the old man of Guanzhong torture room, don't need to be valued? Feng Sha immediately snorted coldly. "Hall Master, I'm not convinced." He wasn't in Liuyan who could call Guan Siyu's name directly. Feng Sha had only been a martial arts grandmaster for a few years, so his strength was naturally not as good as Guan Siyu, so he didn't dare to be so presumptuous. Feng Sha said angrily, "Xiaofan heaven opens once every 30 years. Because Chu Xiu is still young, he still has time. But if I miss this time, when I'm no longer in my prime, even if I get the opportunity, what's the use?" It's true that the real pellet state has a lifespan of 300 years, but how many people can really live to 300 years old? I just stepped into the real pellet state when I'm over 60 years old. I'm already not young. How long can I last in my prime? How many 30 years can I wait in this life? Feng Sha's words were very aggrieved, but in fact, he was telling the truth. In theory, a martial arts grandmaster of the real pellet state could indeed live for 300 years, but that was only in theory. Could you guarantee that you wouldn't fight with others for a lifetime and leave no internal injuries? Therefore, there were very few martial Dao masters who could live to 300 years old. Although Feng Sha wasn't too old when he stepped into the real pellet state, he wasn't young either. Therefore, the peak of his prime was from now until he was about 100 years old. After 100 years, his vitality would no longer grow. At that time, even if he really got any treasure, it would be of limited use to him. Chu Xiu chuckled and said, "Chief Feng, it's not that I, Chu Xiu, want to fight for anything, but your words are interesting. You can't wait, but can I? Right now, I'm representing the Guanzhong torture room to compete with Zhang Qingzhen, Zhong Xian, and the other elites of the younger generation. If I don't go this time, I'll be one step behind them. In the future I might be one step behind them. It's not that I, Chu Xiu, want to speak harshly, but with my current status among the younger generation in the world of martial arts, if I were to run to another top-notch faction in the world of martial arts, they would rather give up the opportunity to their own sons to let me join them." Feng Sha sneered. "Young man, you're really arrogant. Go if you have the ability. Hand over all the things that the Guanzhong torture room gave you. I want to see if they will believe you. No matter how talented he is, no one will take in a slave with no bottom line and no one will take him in." Feng Sha was also an experienced man, so he naturally wouldn't be rebuked by Chu Xiu's words. Chu Xiu's talent was indeed rare in the underworld. The Guanzhong torture room got Chu Xiu and became famous. But at the same time, if Chu Xiu left the Guanzhong torture room now, not many sects would dare to take Chu Xiu in. Chu Xiu first joined the Blue Dragon Society, then betrayed the Blue Dragon Society for no reason, then joined the Guanzhong torture room. Now, if Chu Xiu betrayed the Guanzhong torture room and joined other forces, wouldn't he be a slave to 3 different families? Even if he did it once or twice, he wouldn't be able to do it a 3rd time. At that time, there would probably be a lot of people who would doubt Chu Xiu's loyalty. Those powers would also be worried that if they took in and nurtured Chu Xiu would betray them in the future. If that happened, wouldn't it be like drawing water with a sieve? Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and looked at Feng Sha, saying coldly, "Who are you calling a slave to 3 different families?" Not long ago, because of Yin Buotong's matter, Chu Xiu had a fight with Fang Sha. The other party also used the sky-extinguishing earth-annihilating fist. At that time, Chu Xiu was still slightly inferior to Fang Sha in terms of strength. However, after being hunted down by Nie Renlong, Chu Xiu's cultivation base did not make much of a breakthrough. However, he could sense that his strength had risen by a notch. Moreover, he faced several martial Dao grandmasters head-on several times in a row, and one of his opponents was Nie Renlong, who was ranked on the Fengyun list. When facing these martial Dao grandmasters who had condensed the real pellet state again, Chu Xiu's state of mind also changed a little. These martial Dao grandmasters did not seem to be unattainable. Seeing that the tension between the two sides was getting stronger, Mei Qinglian suddenly said, "This is an internal matter of the Guanzhong torture room, and it's not appropriate for a woman like me to butt in. However, from the perspective of an outsider, I still have something to say." However, and Lionian said coldly, "Since it's not appropriate for you to butt in, don't butt in. Since you know you're an outsider, why are you still talking nonsense?" Guan Siyu looked at An Lionian and said coldly, "Madam, speak. Everyone is listening." An Lionian looked at Guan Siyu and shouted in a low voice, "Guan Siyu, are you crazy? Do you know what you're doing now? You're actually letting a woman express her opinion on such an important matter?" An Lionian was really a little angry at that moment. In fact, Fang Sha wasn't his man, nor was he Guan Siyu's man. It was just that neither of them wanted to submit to Guan Siyu completely. Therefore, Fang Sha couldn't go now, and Guan Siyu wasn't targeting him, so An Lionian could keep his mouth shut. However, An Lionian realized that Guan Siyu had really changed. All these years, An Lionian had never truly submitted to Guan Siyu. However, he was convinced of Guan Siyu's abilities. When she had first taken over the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Siyu had been really impartial. For the sake of the torture hall's laws, she had even crippled her personal disciple. This also made many warriors of the Guanzhong torture room see Guan Siyu's attitude. The entire Guanzhong torture room's atmosphere instantly became upright, and no one dared to violate the laws again. After all, Guan Siyu had dared to be so ruthless to her personal disciple. What else could they be lacking? Furthermore, Guan Siyu had colluded with the other three nations to acknowledge the Guanzhong torture room status, and led the torture hall to its current unprecedented status. Although An Lionian hadn't submitted to Guan Siyu, he was truly convinced. At the very least, if he had been the hallmaster, An Lionian knew that he wouldn't have been able to achieve Guan Siyu's level of talent. Therefore, An Lionian had always been very low-key all these years. Even the punishment division was only in charge. Although he hadn't submitted, he hadn't caused trouble for Guan Siyu. He had even watched as Guan Siyu had placed his trusted aide, Si Ming, into the punishment division as the third leader. This was An Lionian's attitude. After all, he was also a member of the Guanzhong torture room and had been nurtured by the Guanzhong torture room. Therefore, he was happy to see the Guanzhong torture room grow stronger one day. However, at some point in time, Guan Siyu had started to change. Not only was she no longer so enthusiastic about expanding the Guanzhong torture room, but she had also started to be anxious to maintain her position. Furthermore, she had planted her own forces in various areas. The iron-faced judge of the past had now developed his own selfish motives. As for when all of this had started, it had only started after that woman of unknown origins had appeared by Guan Siyu's side. Mei Qinglian's gaze was aggrieved. She put on a pitiful expression and said, "I just couldn't bear to see the Guanzhong torture room descend into internal strife over such a small matter. Therefore, I just wanted to say a few words of justice. Since the great leader isn't willing, then I won't say any more. Don't affect our harmony." For some reason, An Lionian was infuriated when he saw Mei Qinglian like this. Anger surged in his heart, and he slammed the table and pointed at Mei Qinglian as he roared, "Demoness, how dare you sow discord here? Do you have the right to speak here?" Chu Xiu raised his brows. There was clearly something wrong with An Lionian's current state. From the looks of it, An Lionian was an introverted, calm, and gloomy person. However, he was unable to control his emotions in front of so many people. Clearly, something was not right. Chu Xiu did not believe that Mei Qinglian was not behind this. However, what was even stranger was that none of the three martial Dao masters present noticed what Mei Qinglian had done. Neither did Chu Xiu. Now that his mental strength had recovered, He could use the heaven sun gazing at air to take a look. However, if he used the heaven sun gazing at air in such a situation, not only would Chu Xiu be tricking Mei Qinglian, but he would also be tricking himself. When Guan Xiyu saw this scene, the aura around him condensed to the extreme. It was as if he had transformed into a black hole, absorbing endless heaven and earth yuan qi into it. It was boundless and as terrifying as an abyss. Everyone present was incomparably shocked. They had all seen Guan Xiyu fight before. Even when Xiahou Zhan came to fight over Chu Xiu previously, Guan Xiyu had not revealed such a terrifying aura. And Liuyan also revealed a look of shock. It had been a long time since he had seen Guan Xiyu fight. And Liuyan did not even watch the battle between Guan Xiyu and Xiahou Zhan previously. It was only when he sensed Guan Xiyu's aura again that Liuyan realized how powerful Guan Xiyu was. In terms of time spent breaking through to the martial Dao Master Realm, and Liuyan was more than 10 years earlier than Guan Xiyu. However, Guan Xiyu's current strength had probably left him in the dust. Most people in the pugilistic world believed that Guan Xiyu's strength was not worthy of his ranking on the Wind Cloud list. They felt that he was not qualified to be ranked in the top 10 on the Wind Cloud list and compete with those true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouses. It was not only the people in the pugilistic world who thought so. People like Liuyan and the others in the Guanzhong torture room thought so too. They felt that Guan Xiyu's ranking was entirely due to Chu Kuanga's influence. In the end, Liuyan finally realized that putting aside whether Guan Xiyu was worthy of his ranking or not, at least Guan Xiyu was not as weak as he imagined. Chapter 540. Guan Xiyu's aura had already condensed to a terrifying level. It was as if the entire punishment hall headquarters would be destroyed if this aura was released. And Liuyan glared at Guan Xiyu. As he resisted Guan Xiyu's aura with great difficulty, he gritted his teeth and said, 9 transformations of the divine power, heaven-devouring. This technique originated from the remnant of the heaven-devouring demon codex that I obtained when I killed heaven-devouring demon codex. Now, you are using it to deal with me. Guan Xiyu's expression didn't change as she said, the remnant of the heaven-devouring demon codex is still in the arsenal. Now, I only have the 9 transformations of the divine power that belongs to me. And Liuyan, I can tolerate whatever you've done all these years because you're a veteran of the Guanzhong torture room. You're a comrade who fought alongside Lord Chu Kuanga, and you've made great contributions to the Guanzhong torture room. But don't forget that I'm the hall master of the Guanzhong torture room now. I've already said this once. This is the second time, and I don't wish to say it a third time today. After saying that, Guan Xiyu withdrew her aura, allowing everyone present to heave a sigh of relief. At that moment, Guan Xiyu said indifferently, Madam, just say whatever you want to say. No one will interrupt you now. Mei Qinglian stood up and said, Then I'll say it. There are only 3 keys. Disregarding status and other things, just based on contributions, Official Chu is also qualified to go. Chief Feng, forgive me for being blunt, but over the past few years, has Chief Feng led the punishment hall to any great contributions? The answer is none. The third leader, Si Ming, will handle the small matters, while the big matters will either be handled by Lord Liuyan or the old master. The one who has the most free time is you, Lord Feng Sha. On the other hand, ever since Chu Xiu joined the Guanzhong torture room, he has made great contributions to the Guanzhong torture room time and time again. He has earned fame and benefits. Lord Feng, I'm afraid that your contributions aren't as great as Chu Xiu's, right? Feng Sha wanted to retort, but everyone could see that his contributions during this period of time were indeed inferior to Chu Xiu's. However, the problem was that Feng Sha was already the second in command of the punishment hall. He was a martial arts grandmaster, and he was already at the top. Above him was Liuyan, who was more powerful and experienced than him. Below him was Guan Xiyu's trusted aide, Si Ming. Therefore, if there were any problems, there would be others to take care of things that were too difficult or too easy. Feng Sha naturally would not rush. Mei Qinglian continued, and let's not talk about the contribution first. The 3 keys to enter Little Fan Tian all have their origins. One of them was passed down from generation to generation in the Guanzhong punishment hall, but the other 2 were found by the previous hallmaster, Lord Chu Kuanga. Xiao as Mei, Chu Mei Long as hall, Chu Chu as I hallmaster if I hall as Zhou hallmaster could. Therefore, strictly speaking, shouldn't we ask Chu Kuangge's only son, Chu Yuanqing, about how these two keys should be distributed? Feng Sha's face darkened when he heard that. If that was the case, he could just give the keys to Chu Xiao. Was there even a need for discussion? Therefore, if the keys were given to Chu Yuanqing to distribute, Chu Xiao would definitely get one. The most disgusting thing was that Feng Sha couldn't refute that, because Chu Yuanqing had a very special status in the Guanzhong torture room. Although he didn't have any real power, Feng Sha had to treat Chu Yuanqing politely just because he was Chu Kuangge's only son. Even in Liuanian wouldn't show him any displeasure. Seeing that Mei Qinglian had rendered Feng Sha speechless, Guan Siyu said solemnly, "It's decided then. And Liuanian, Chu Xiao, and I will head to Xiaofan heaven this time." Feng Sha, don't feel wronged. Weren't you worried that you wouldn't be in your prime the next time Xiaofan heaven opens? There's a drop of 10,000-year hollow azurite juice in the armory. If you consume it, it can increase your lifespan by 10 to 20 years. When you were cultivating the heaven-extinguishing earth-extinguishing oblivion-killing fist in your early years, you suffered a backlash once, causing your internal organs to suffer internal injuries. This drop of 10,000-year hollow azurite juice can also heal your internal injuries. Hearing Guan Siyu's words, Feng Sha's eyes still revealed a hint of unwillingness. He did want the drop of 10,000-year hollow azurite juice in the armory, but he could exchange for it after accumulating some more merit points. However, there were countless opportunities in Xiaofan heaven. What if he could obtain something more precious than the 10,000-year hollow azurite juice? Feng Sha stood up and said coldly, "Hallmaster, I'm still unconvinced. I've made countless contributions to the Guanzhong torture room all these years. If it were anything else, I could give it to a junior like him, but I can't give up the right to enter Xiaofan heaven. If I, a martial Dao master, am not qualified to enter, what right does a junior like Chu Xiao have? Or could it be that I, Feng Sha, have fought for the Guanzhong torture room my entire life, but I can't compare to the contributions of a junior like him?" Guan Siyu frowned. She did not seem to have expected Feng Sha to be so persistent. Even after she showed her attitude, Feng Sha still insisted on going. Just as Guan Siyu was about to say something, Chu Xiao suddenly said, "Chief Feng, you keep mentioning martial Dao masters. Do you mean that anyone who is a martial Dao master is qualified to enter?" Alright, let's not talk about status, influence, and contributions today. We'll just talk about strength. If I win, this opportunity will be mine. Do you dare to accept the challenge? Xiao Yi and the rest were shocked. Chu Xiao actually dared to challenge a martial Dao master? Although they knew that Chu Xiao had killed a martial Dao master before, that person was only a rogue cultivator and had limited strength. He could not be compared to Feng Sha, who was the second in command of the arrest division. Mei Qinglian also looked at Chu Xiao in surprise. Since when did this guy become so arrogant? In reality, Chu Xiao did not need to say anything. Since Mei Qinglian had persuaded Guan Siyu to replace Feng Sha with Chu Xiao, the key would belong to Chu Xiao no matter what. Now that Chu Xiao had taken the initiative to say something, it would be self-defeating if he lost. Chu Xiao narrowed his eyes at Feng Sha. Mei Qinglian was right. He had really become arrogant, and he wanted to vent his anger from being hunted by the righteous manner. After fighting with Nieren Long, Chu Xiao realized that the so-called martial Dao master was not an unreachable existence. When Chu Xiao was very far from the martial Dao master realm, he would naturally feel a sense of reverence because of his strength. This was not fear but instinct. It was an instinctive reverence for strength. An ant like nobody who kept shouting that man could conquer nature and that he wanted to defy nature was just a joke. Only when one had strength that was close to the heavens would one be qualified to defy nature. Now that Chu Xiao had killed a martial Dao master and fought with a martial Dao master like Nieren Long who was on the martial Dao leaderboard, he indeed had the right to be arrogant. He also had the right to be on equal footing with a martial Dao master. Didn't Feng Sha say that he was a junior? Chu Xiao would also tell Feng Sha that the so-called seniors and juniors did not look at age or seniority, but strength. Feng Sha was stunned when he heard that. Then he laughed and said, "That's what you said. Hallmaster, you saw it too. It was Chu Xiao who took the initiative to fight me. I'm not bullying him." Guan Siyu frowned and looked at Chu Xiao. "Are you really ready?" Chu Xiao nodded and said, "Of course, in case someone is always unconvinced." Guan Siyu waved her hand and said, Since that's the case, you guys can fight. However, remember not to get injured. Feng Sha chuckled and said, Don't worry, Hallmaster. I'll be careful. Chu Xiu also said calmly, I know what I'm doing too. Feng Sha was a martial Dao master, and Chu Xiu also had the strength to kill a martial Dao master. The battle between the two of them was extremely destructive, so the few of them moved to the innermost training ground of the headquarters. This place was usually used by martial Dao masters like Guan Xiyu to cultivate. It was filled with fortified defensive formations. Even if a martial Dao master attacked, they would not be able to break it completely. Feng Sha stared at Chu Xiu. He did not know where this kid got the courage to challenge him. During the conflict with Yin Batong previously, he had stood up for Yin Batong and exchanged a blow with Chu Xiu. Although Chu Xiu blocked his punch, which surprised Feng Sha, Chu Xiu was still far from him in terms of strength at that time. Although Feng Sha admitted that he was far inferior to Chu Xiu in the same realm, the two of them were now a major realm apart. Furthermore, they were in the martial Dao master realm, which was like the difference between clouds and mud. He had only been in closed-door cultivation for a few months. Could it be that Chu Xiu had made a breakthrough in closed-door cultivation? In any case, Feng Sha did not believe it. However, although that was what Feng Sha thought, he took the initiative to attack after he stood still. He threw a punch, and boundless killing intent condensed into a substance. The scarlet killing intent condensed into a fiend celestial phantom behind Feng Sha. Sky extinguishing earth obliterating oblivion killing fist was unleashed with all his might. Feng Sha was the leader of the enforcement division who had experienced hundreds of battles. His strength was obtained through killing, not through closed-door cultivation. Although he looked down on Chu Xiu, he did not show any mercy and attacked with all his might. Feng Sha had seen things like failing miserably in an easy task countless times, and he would not make such a mistake again. Looking at Feng Sha's punch, the corner of Chu Xiu's lips curled into a smile, and he also threw a punch. In an instant, his killing intent condensed and he entered the oblivion killing realm. He was also using the sky extinguishing earth obliterating oblivion killing fist. Everyone present raised their eyebrows at the same time. Was Chu Xiu provoking them? Everyone knew that Chu Xiu was proficient in the sky extinguishing earth obliterating oblivion killing fist. However, the sky extinguishing earth obliterating oblivion killing fist was only one of Chu Xiu's many cultivation methods, and it was not his famous skill. Feng Sha's sky extinguishing earth obliterating oblivion killing fist was the martial art that he was truly famous for. Chu Xiu had so many cultivation methods, but he did not use them. Instead, he chose to use the sky extinguishing earth obliterating oblivion killing fist. This could easily be seen as a provocation. However, the moment Chu Xiu threw his punch, everyone realized that Chu Xiu's punch was somewhat different from Feng Sha's. Chapter 541. In terms of martial arts, Chu Xiu's weapon had always been the saber. However, Chu Xiu had learned a variety of close combat killing techniques, and he welcomed all of them with his fists, palms, and fingers. Similarly, among these close combat killing techniques, Chu Xiu had not been able to truly comprehend the essence of any of them. However, when he was being pursued previously, Chu Xiu's mental energy had been crippled, and he had not been able to use the conspicuous demonic blade. Most of the time, he had been using close combat killing techniques to fight against his enemies. His fist intent had also improved during that battle, and he had comprehended something different. Right now, although Chu Xiu and Feng Sha were both using the Annihilation of Heavens and Annihilation Oblivion killing fist, there was a hint of something different about Chu Xiu's killing fist. Golden Buddhist light stuck close to Chu Xiu's arm, and seething demonic qis combined with killing intent and fiendish aura, releasing a series of terrifying demonic howls. At the same time, with the great Vajra divine powers and the 9 heavens demonic golden body, 2 body tempering techniques from both the Buddhist and demon lineages, Chu Xiu could be said to be completely unafraid of clashing head-on with martial arts grandmasters like Feng Sha. However, this was not the most special thing. What truly made Chu Xiu's punch different from Feng Sha's oblivion killing fist was the fist intent. It was a powerful fist intent that was invincible and looked down on everything. As the punch landed, a powerful fist intent surged out. Buddhist light, demonic qi, blood, and qi merged into one and suddenly erupted. With the 2 fists facing each other, With Chu Xiu and Feng Sha in the center, the ground under their feet started to crack inch by inch despite being protected by a formation. The prowess caused the countenances of Xiao Yi and the others to change drastically. Although Chu Xiu was still at the one with heaven realm, it was true that he was no longer in existence on the same level as them. A hint of surprise flashed in Guan Xiyu's eyes as she slowly uttered 3 words, Chen Qing Di. Sitting next to Guan Xiyu, Mei Qinglian did not make a sound. She had also recognized that Chu Xiu's punch was somewhat similar to Chen Qing Di's. Guan Xiyu and Mei Qinglian had both seen Chen Qing Di in action before. In fact, their guesses were not wrong. For Chu Xiu to be able to use such a fist intent, the punch that Chen Qing Di had displayed back at the Jielingdong clan had given Chu Xiu of great inspiration. Of Chen Qing Di of Chu. Chu Xiu was not Xie Xiaolu. He was not a personal disciple of Chen Qing Di. Of course, it was impossible for him to be taught the true fist intent. However, he could learn from others. Compared to other martial artists who did not have a master, Chu Xiu's only advantage was that he was willing to think. Most of the martial artists who did not have a master would only be shocked when they watched the fight of the powerhouses. They would only be a bystander watching the show. They would only shout 666 at the side and sigh at the strength of the powerhouses and how strong their martial technique was. This would increase the capital that they could brag about in the future. However, Chu Xiu was different. He would think about why these powerhouses were so strong, where they were strong, and how he could become so strong. This habit made it so that Chu Xiu would gain some comprehension every time he fought or watched other experts fight, and he would make some slight progress. Although it was only a small amount, when accumulated, the benefits that these comprehensions could bring to Chu Xiu could be seen with the naked eye. At this time, Feng Sha's eyes also revealed a look of surprise. How long had it been? How did Chu Xiu's strength increase to such an extent? Feng Sha's heart sank. Before he thought that Chu Xiu was arrogant, but now it seemed that Chu Xiu was not arrogant at all. He really had the confidence to fight him head-on. Thinking of this, Feng Sha did not retreat. Instead, he advanced. Killing intent condensed around his body. Wisps of crimson gang qi filled his palms. Endless power of heaven and earth was drawn by it. In an instant, it turned into a large net that enveloped Chu Xiu. The strands of stellar energy that were filled with killing intent were all-pervasive, sealing off all the places Chu Xiu could evade and enveloping him. So long as he was touched by even a strand, the strands of stellar energy would tighten tighter and tighter, and in the end, it would strangle Chu Xiu to death. Of course, Feng Sha would not kill Chu Xiu in front of Guan Xiyu. However, weapons had no eyes, and fists and feet had no heart. It was still very necessary to teach Chu Xiu a lesson that he would never forget. Facing the all-pervasive net, the sun, moon, and stars in Chu Xiu's eyes rotated. He executed the heaven sun gazing at air to the extreme. Instead of retreating, he advanced. His figure was like a fish swimming back and forth in the net, but he was able to avoid being enveloped by the net every time. Seeing that Chu Xiu's figure was getting closer and closer, Feng Sha's heart was filled with impatience. What kind of trick is this Chu Xiu using? He can actually see through my thoughts and dodge in advance? A cold look flashed in Feng Sha's eyes. He formed a seal with both hands, and in an instant boundless heaven and earth yuan qi surged into the threads of gang qi. With so much power surging into them in an instant, the threads of gang qi could no longer withstand it. With a loud bang, they all exploded. Chu Xiu, who was in the center, had nowhere to hide at all. However, the moment the gang qi exploded, Chu Xiu also made a move. Chu Xiu held the fearless seal in his hand. Buddhist light bloomed around him, condensing into the phantom of Vairocana that appeared behind him. The Buddhist light shone for eternity, but it remained majestic in the midst of the explosion of the threads of gang qi. The Great Sun Shifting Technique. This was a martial art that belonged to Master Tam Yuan. It was rarely seen among the Central Plains warriors, but its powerful explosive power could completely allow Chu Xiu to take a full-powered blow from a martial Dao master. Under the shroud of the Buddhist light, Chu Xiu's figure had already rushed in front of Feng Sha. As his fist landed, the Buddhist light and demonic qi bloomed with unparalleled power. Feng Sha harumphed coldly and unleashed the heavens decimating earth annihilating oblivion killing fist. Compared to Chu Xiu's heavens decimating earth annihilating oblivion killing fist, Feng Sha's punch was even purer. As the punch landed, gang qi exploded. However, Chu Xiu seemed to be unfazed by it and continued to throw punch after punch, completely clashing head-on with Feng Sha. However, the other spectators frowned. By doing this, Chu Xiu seemed to have the intention of attacking Feng Sha's strength with his own weakness. Although they admitted that Chu Xiu's explosive power was indeed very strong, he was not a martial Dao master after all and had not condensed the martial Dao true core. If he continued to clash head-on, the one who could not afford to waste time was still Chu Xiu. At the same time, Feng Sha also noticed this. He did not retreat at all and clashed head-on with Chu Xiu. Although Feng Sha's qi and blood were also boiling under the powerful force, Chu Xiu was not much better off. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly withdrew his fist and took a few steps back. He formed a seal with his hands, and in an instant, boundless demonic qi erupted, triggering the qi and blood in Feng Sha's body. At this moment, Feng Sha suddenly had a bad feeling. I've been tricked. He had forgotten that Chu Xiu also knew the demonic book's demonic blood technique. Originally, the demonic blood technique was not very useful for martial Dao grandmasters. However, just now, Chu Xiu had exchanged dozens of punches with Feng Sha, and each punch was full force. The power was so great that it was enough to shake the qi and blood in Feng Sha's body, and this was the best time to use the demonic blood technique. Feng Sha groaned in pain, and his face turned red. The qi and blood in his body were boiling as if a pot was boiling. Boundless demonic qi shrouded him, and wisps of qi and blood were sucked out along with the demonic qi, floating around Chu Xiu's body, making Chu Xiu look even more evil at this time. Feng Sha roared, and the martial Dao true core rotated wildly in his body, accepting the world into his body and suppressing his body, finally suppressing the boiling qi and blood. However, at this time, what greeted him was Chu Xiu's saber. An ultimate saber surrounded by endless blood qi and demonic qi. Everyone in the pugilistic world knew that Chu Xiu used a saber. At first, Feng Sha also found it strange that Chu Xiu did not use a weapon. Could it be that there was something wrong with his demonic saber? However, when the two sides fought to the extreme, Feng Sha also subconsciously ignored this point. It was only now that Chu Xiu finally slashed out this fatal saber. The blood qi absorbed from Feng Sha's body was not enough to condense into the blood-dissipating saber, but Chu Xiu condensed it on the edge of the saber, turning it into a blood-red blade that also had the effect of breaking the opponent's protective aura. Boundless demonic qi wrapped around the saber, surging and surging, like a saber slashed out from hell. It turned into a boundless mournful wail, slashing down on Feng Sha's head. Although Chu Xiu's previous attacks were not weak, they did not make Feng Sha feel threatened. But now, this saber really made Feng Sha's hair stand on end. Therefore, his first reaction was to retreat, and his second was to dodge. However, just as Feng Sha moved, he felt a strange qi locked tightly on him. Feng Sha had just moved a little when Chu Xiu's saber momentum had already followed him closely. In the span of a few breaths, Feng Sha had changed his body 32 times, but Chu Xiu had seen through him 33 times. Among them, there was one time when he did not even change his body and Chu Xiu had already seen through him. For martial Dao experts, a breath's time was very long. Therefore, after a few breaths, Feng Sha was shocked to find that Chu Xiu's saber was already upon him. He did not even have the last chance to dodge. Feng Sha roared angrily, and blood-colored gang qi burst out from his body. However, Chu Xiu's saber cut through his gang qi like it was tofu. It directly tore through his protective gang qi, and raging demonic qi erupted. The blood-killing saber's unique characteristic was that it could easily break through the opponent's gang qi defense by absorbing qi and blood from the opponent. Although Chu Xiu was not using the complete version of the blood-killing saber, and had only added a layer of sharpness to his heavenly demon dance, this characteristic was still retained. Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance was gently placed on Feng Sha's neck. The extremely sharp aura caused Feng Sha's hair to stand on end, and his eyes were still filled with disbelief. I've actually lost. Chu Xiu did not withdraw his saber. He merely looked at Feng Sha and said indifferently, "Thank you for letting me win." In fact, he could have killed Feng Sha with a single slash just now. However, in the current situation, killing Feng Sha would not make things any easier for Chu Xiu. Moreover, if Chu Xiu were to kill Feng Sha in front of Guan Xiu and An Lionian, he would really be treating the two martial Dao masters like decorations. Chapter 542. In fact, everyone had already speculated that Chu Xiu had been defeated by Fang Sha. After all, Chu Xiu had the battle record of killing a martial Dao master. What if he still had some trump cards up his sleeves? However, no one had expected that Chu Xiu would defeat Fang Sha as easily as crushing dry weeds. How powerful was Chu Xiu? Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance was still stuck to Fang Sha's neck. The cold aura made Fang Sha feel the cruelty of reality. He wanted to say something, but he could not say it in the end. Fang Sha was actually a little unconvinced. Even he had never imagined that he would lose in such a baffling manner. He still had a trump card that he had not used, but he had lost in the end. What was going on? However, under the watchful eyes of everyone, he was a martial Dao master and a senior of the Guanzhong torture room. If he were to go back on his word and say that he wanted to compete again, would he still have any face left? Fang Sha did not know how he had lost, but Guan Xiyu and Mei Qinglian understood. Both of them looked at Chu Xiu with a strange look in their eyes. Chu Xiu's control over the rhythm of the battle was simply terrifying. Chu Xiu had been able to win this battle not only because of his powerful strength, but also because of the strangeness of his blood transformation saber and the power of his final saber move. Instead, it was because of Chu Xiu's control over the rhythm of the battle. From the beginning, Fang Sha had fallen into Chu Xiu's rhythm. Every step he took was completely within Chu Xiu's expectations. When Chu Xiu finally slashed with his saber, the outcome was already clear. Perhaps this was not a battle of life and death, and Fang Sha had not taken out his trump card in a battle of life and death. However, at the same time, Chu Xiu also had trump cards that he had not used. In another battle, Chu Xiu could also change his tactics on the spot, and the result was unpredictable. This kind of control of the rhythm of the battle was not something that could be taught. It could only be said that Chu Xiu was gifted and extremely sensitive to the situation of the battle. If it were someone else, they would not be able to think of this in such a fierce battle. He did not dare to think of these messy things. Fang Sha pushed aside Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance with resentment and turned to leave. No matter what the reason was, he had already lost. It was impossible to fight again. In any case, he had lost a lot of face this time. Guan Xiyu stood up and said in a deep voice, "We've fought, and we've competed. This matter is settled. When Xiaofan opens, and Liuyan, Chu Xiu, and I will enter." The outcome was set. Xiao Yi and Chu Simo were currently shocked by Chu Xiu's strength, while Yin Batong left secretly. In the past, Yin Batong had dared to provoke Chu Xiu because he relied on his experience in the Guanzhong torture room and his relationship with Fang Sha. In the end, even a martial Dao master like Fang Sha had lost to Chu Xiu. This made Yin Batong simply unable to believe it. At the same time, a sense of danger arose in his heart. After this, if Chu Xiu wanted to take revenge on him, what could he use to resist? However, Yin Batong had underestimated Chu Xiu. Right now, Chu Xiu's heart was on Xiaofan. How could he still have the leisure to take revenge on him? After the matter was over, Guan Xiyu looked for An Liuyan and Chu Xiu and gave each of them a key to Xiaofan. An Liuyan left with a dark expression after receiving the key, but Guan Xiyu did not mind. After An Liuyan left, Chu Xiu looked at his back and said in a deep voice, "Hall Master, the Punishment Bureau is the trump card of the Guanzhong torture room. Most of the Punishment Hall's resources are provided to the Punishment Bureau, but the Great Leader doesn't even have the slightest bit of respect for you. This is a little too much. In my opinion, the problem of the Guanzhong torture room isn't external, but internal." Guan Xiyu sighed and said, "Of course I know that, but the Guanzhong torture room can't be messed up. And Liuyan is from the same generation as Hall Master Chu Kuanga. He has a group of trusted subordinates in the Punishment Bureau, and he has considerable prestige. Most importantly, he is one of the trump cards of the Guanzhong torture room. If something happens to me or I'm not in the punishment hall, An Liuyan will be the only one who can handle things on his own. You don't have to take this matter to heart. An Liuyan isn't targeting you. When Xiaofan opens, you just have to go in." After hearing Guan Xiyu's words, Chu Xiu did not continue to sow discord. He merely bowed and turned to leave. Some things only needed to be said once. Saying it too many times would incur disgust. After Chu Xiu left Guan Xiyu's place, he was secretly called over by Mei Qinglian. In the punishment hall's backyard, Mei Qinglian looked at Chu Xiu with a frown and said, "You were a little rash today. Even if you didn't challenge Feng Sha, I was confident that I could get you the right to enter Xiaofan. In the end you provoked him. Once you lose, there's no turning back. Chu Xiao said indifferently, it's precisely because I have the confidence to win that I challenged him. Isn't it better to convince some people? Moreover, I'm not being rash. It's just that sometimes I have to bear with it, but I can't lose my drive. Saintess, with all due respect, the hidden devil lineage has lost some of its drive. It's fine for sects like the phaseless demon sect that are still active in the pugilistic world. However, some people have been hiding in the dark for a long time and think that hiding is their main goal. They have forgotten why they have to hide. Mei Qinglian's expression immediately turned cold. She frowned and a cold aura slowly spread out. She said coldly, "Are you saying that I've lost my drive?" Chu Xiao said indifferently, "Honest advice is unpleasant to the ear. Saintess, please don't take it personally. This is just a suggestion. If Saintess doesn't want to hear it, I'll take it back." Chu Xiao was not deliberately provoking Mei Qinglian. He was indeed speaking the truth. If the hidden devil lineage could only hide in the dark for the rest of their lives, then the hidden devil lineage would really be finished. Moreover, Chu Xiao was not being honest when he said that in front of Mei Qinglian. Chu Xiao felt that it was time for him to change his position. Previously, Chu Xiao needed Mei Qinglian's help to gain a foothold in the Guanzhong torture room. He also needed the secret support of the hidden devil lineage. Now that Chu Xiao had the strength to face a martial Dao grandmaster head-on, although he would not burn the bridge after crossing the river, he should at least change his treatment. Seeing Chu Xiao's indifferent expression, Mei Qinglian suddenly understood something. She retracted the aura around her and snorted, "If one is strong enough, no one would be willing to stay in the dark and be a local mouse. You saw how Lionian was today. I wanted to kill him on the spot, but didn't I have to endure it for the time being? Chu Xiao, since you're a member of the hidden devil lineage, then you should know the situation of the hidden devil lineage. What the hidden devil lineage lacks is not strength, but opportunity." If it was the previous Chu Xiao, if Chu Xiao dared to speak to Mei Qinglian in such a tone, Mei Qinglian would definitely let him know what was called the rules. However, when she thought of the might Chu Xiao displayed when he defeated Feng Sha, the current Chu Xiao was enough for Mei Qinglian to speak to him as an equal and explain things to him calmly. People from the devil lineage were much more realistic than those from the righteous lineage. As long as one had the strength, everything would be fine. Chu Xiao raised his eyebrows and said, "Heroes make the situation, and the situation makes the hero. The opportunity might come at any time." After exchanging a few more pleasantries with Mei Qinglian, Chu Xiao directly returned to the Guanxi land to wait for news. Before entering the Xiaofan heaven, Chu Xiao had to at least adjust his condition to the peak. Looking at Chu Xiao's departing figure, Mei Qinglian's eyes revealed a hint of incomprehension. After a while, Mei Qinglian murmured softly, "Lu Jin, what kind of guy did you bring into the hidden devil lineage?" Originally, Mei Qinglian thought that she could see through Chu Xiao. It was only now that Mei Qinglian realized that she had never seen through Chu Xiao. Chu Xiao was definitely the kind of person who was unwilling to submit to others. Chu Xiao's ambition was written on his face and seeped into his bones. When Mei Qinglian first came into contact with Chu Xiao was still very obedient at that time. He was even considered by Mei Qinglian and the phaseless devil sect to be someone worthy of training. But she did not know when Chu Xiao had grown to such a realm. He was even strong enough to talk to her as an equal, and he even dared to talk to her as an equal. If this kind of thing happened in some famous righteous sects, it would be disrespectful and presumptuous. However, in the devil lineage, whether it was the bright devil lineage or the hidden devil lineage, the first thing that everyone valued was strength. Almost no one would care about those false reputations. Therefore, regarding Chu Xiao's attitude just now, Mei Qinglian was not too angry, because these were all what Chu Xiao deserved. However, this Chu Xiao's change was so fast that it was enough to prove his deep scheming. Even now, Mei Qinglian could not understand what Chu Xiao was thinking. Such a person was definitely not easy to deal with. Whether Chu Xiao's existence was good or bad for the hidden devil lineage, Mei Qinglian did not know. Shaking her head, Mei Qinglian did not think about these messy things for the time being. The hidden devil lineage was originally a mix of good and bad people. To put it bluntly, there were not many people in the hidden devil lineage who were easy to deal with. Now that there was an ambitious Chu Xiao, it did not seem to be a big deal. Moreover, her hidden devil lineage had already declined to the extent that she was the only one left, so Mei Qinglian could not be bothered to care about these things. Chu Xiu was brought into the hidden devil lineage by Lu Jin. In the future, if anything happened, the phaseless devil sect would be the one to shoulder it. At this time, Chu Xiu did not know what Mei Qinglian was thinking, and he did not care. Today, his attitude was deliberately done for Mei Qinglian to see. After returning to the Guanxi branch, Chu Xiu immediately opened the box containing the little mortal key. However, the so-called key in the box made Chu Xiu slightly stunned. It turned out to be a strange, irregularly shaped stone, as if it was knocked off from something. Chapter 543. In Chu Xiu's eyes, the so-called minor mortal world's key was just an irregular stone. It didn't have any energy on it. It was strange because the stone was too hard. In the beginning, Chu Xiu only tried to pinch it. When he found that it didn't budge, he tried using his astral qi, but there was no reaction. In the end, Chu Xiu even used the heavenly demon dance to slash the stone twice, but it still didn't leave a scratch. This was very shocking. Holding the stone, Chu Xiu thought for a while, then got up and went to find Lu Fengxian. The matter of minor mortal world was a secret to other rogue cultivators, but to those big sects that had the qualifications to enter minor mortal world, it wasn't a big secret. Naturally, Chu Xiu wouldn't hide it from Lu Fengxian. After explaining the matter of minor mortal world, Chu Xiu took out the stone and asked Shui Wuxiang and the others, "Have you heard of minor mortal world in ancient times? Have you seen this thing before?" Shui Wuxiang and the other three were people who had survived from the ancient era. The things they knew should be much more than the current martial artists. Shui Wuxiang shook his head and said, "When we were sealed, the great ancient calamity hadn't started yet, so we don't know what happened in the last period of time. But I can guarantee that there definitely wasn't anything like minor mortal world in ancient times." Speaking up to here, Shui Wuxiang suddenly froze. He picked up the stone in Chu Xiu's hand and carefully looked at it. "Is this thing invulnerable to swords and spears, water and fire, and even astral qi can't destroy it?" Chu Xiu nodded. Shui Wuxiang murmured, "I was wondering why it looked so familiar. If I didn't guess wrong, this thing should be a fragment of the Mortal Heaven Boundary Monument. But how could the Mortal Heaven Boundary Monument break?" "Mortal Heaven Boundary Monument? What's that?" Shui Wuxiang said, "The Mortal Heaven Boundary Steel is the Mortal Heaven Boundary Steel. No one knows what it is. When you mentioned the 3 words lesser mortal sky, and the material of this stone, I thought of it. In ancient times, there was a stone tablet erected at the peak of the highest mountain in the West Pole, Mount Tiansong. On it were the words Mortal World. However, no one knew who set up the stone monument. There were no energy waves coming from it, and no one knew what Mortal Heaven meant. Over time, the stone monument came to be known as the Mortal Heaven Boundary Monument. Also, in ancient times, there were countless people who had tested this Mortal Heaven Boundary Monument. Although there were no energy fluctuations coming from it, it was incomparably sturdy. Even divine weapons were unable to leave a scratch on it. Countless experts had tested it before, but it was all useless. The stone in your hand is exactly the same color as the Mortal Heaven Boundary Monument. Coupled with its special characteristics, I am almost certain that this stone is a part of the Mortal Heaven Boundary Monument. However, even something like the Mortal Boundary Monument could be broken. After we were sealed, what exactly happened in this world? Is the so-called Great Ancient Calamity really so terrifying? Chu Xiu touched the stone in his hand. It seemed that the secrets of the Great Ancient Calamity were beyond his imagination. Even Shui Wuxiang, who had been sealed since the Great Ancient Calamity, couldn't figure it out. "All right, you said that where is the Mount Tiansong at the peak of the West Pole? Why haven't I heard of this place before?" Chu Xiu suddenly asked. Shui Wuxiang said, "After the great calamity of antiquity, the landscape of the entire world has undergone tremendous changes. At the very least, the present world is completely different from the world in our memories. It's basically impossible to find any similarities between it and the present world. According to the location of the Mount Tiansong should be where the East and West Kunlun are located now." Chu Xiu nodded. At this time, Lu Fengxian, who had been silent all this time, suddenly took out a stone from a secret space box. The color was exactly the same as the stone in Chu Xiu's hand, but the shape was different. This thing of mine, is it the same as the key in Brother Chu's hand? Chu Xiao was stunned as he said, Brother Lu, where did you get this thing from? Although small mortal heaven only opened once every 30 years, the rules, methods of entry, and various taboos had already been figured out by the people of the outside world. Therefore, the keys were mostly in the hands of the top powers of the Jianghu and were divided up by everyone. There were very few that were left outside. He never thought that Lu Fengxian would be able to find one. Lu Fengxian scratched his head and said, When I was in West Chu, there was a time when I was resting on the side of the road at night and saw a group of people chasing after another person. Originally, there was no right or wrong in the Jianghu. The person being chased didn't ask for help, so I naturally didn't care. However, the group of people chasing after me wanted to silence me, so I killed them all. The person being chased was already on the verge of death. Before he died, he gave this thing to me and died without saying anything. I didn't understand what this thing was, so I kept it with me. I never thought that this thing would be a treasure. Hearing Lu Fengxian say this, Chu Xiao was slightly speechless. Lu Fengxian's luck was really terrifying. She was sitting at home and treasures fell from the sky. Luck was something that couldn't be seen or touched, but it seemed to be real on Lu Fengxian. It was really terrifying. Shui Wuxiang and the others were very happy. From their point of view, it was definitely their fortune that their master had such luck. In the ancient times, the reason why Marquis Lu Wenho was defeated and killed and his spirit was sealed was actually because of bad luck. All sorts of coincidences made him the enemy of the world. If Marquis Lu Wenho didn't die, then he would truly be invincible in the world. Chu Xiao said in a deep voice, Since Brother Lu also has a key, then we can all wait here for news. I'm afraid that the day of small mortal heaven's opening is not far. Small mortal heaven opened every 30 years. Although there were some differences in the specific time, the difference was only a few days. Therefore, during this period of time, the various sects and the wind agents of Wind-Sweeping Pavilion would pay close attention to the slightest movement in the pugilistic world. Once there were any abnormalities, they would immediately send people to investigate. At this moment, in an ordinary forest on Wei Prefecture's Shangmang Mountain, the entire mountain suddenly opened up and twisted. A large amount of spirit qi burst out, causing the originally dense forest on Shangmang Mountain to become even denser. The changes in Wei Prefecture quickly attracted the attention of many people. Among them, the first to receive the news was Wei Prefecture's largest sect, Azure Wave Sword Sect. At this moment, Azure Wave Sword Sect's eldest disciple, Do Guangchen, was excitedly reporting this matter to Lu Gongyuan. Everyone knew that during the first 6 hours of small mortal heaven's opening, anyone could enter. Even an ordinary person could enter. This was the pavilion closest to the water enjoys moonlight first, something that completely depended on luck. In the history of the pugilistic world, there were many rogue martial artists who encountered small mortal heaven opening not far away from them. They were then accidentally swept into it, and eventually obtained the opportunity. This time, small mortal heaven opened near Azure Wave Sword Sect. This was simply a great opportunity bestowed to Azure Wave Sword Sect by the heavens. However, compared to the excited Do Guangchen, Lu Gongyuan's face didn't have the slightest expression. He was still holding a stone in his hand, which was also the key to small mortal heaven. With Azure Wave Sword Sect's current strength, it was already very good for them to have a key. Lu Gongyuan had also entered small mortal heaven before, but people only knew that there were opportunities inside, but they didn't know that there wasn't a land full of opportunities in the world. There were many opportunities in small mortal heaven, but the dangers were 10 times or even 100 times more than the opportunities. Lu Gongyuan was already old, and there wasn't much use in entering small mortal heaven again. Therefore, he prepared this key for Shen Bai. In the end, Shen Bai was crippled and was still in seclusion in Azure Wave Sword Sect's secret ground. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive, but small mortal heaven just happened to appear in Wei County. This was truly ironic. When Do Guangchen saw that Lu Gongyuan didn't speak, he quickly said, Master, hurry up and give the order for all disciples of Azure Wave Sword Sect to enter small mortal heaven. This is a great opportunity bestowed to Azure Wave Sword Sect by the heavens. Lu Gongyuan shook his head and said, We can't all enter. Do Guangchen was stunned. Why? Other sects needed to rely on keys to enter, but even a sect like the Great Light Temple didn't have many keys. Other forces would even fight to the death for a key just to obtain the qualification to enter small mortal heaven. Now that Azure Wave Sword sect could obviously let the entire sect enter, why didn't Lu Gongyuan agree? Looking at Dou Guangchen, Lu Gongyuan sighed and said, "Don't be blinded by benefits. When everyone mentions small mortal heaven, they would only mention the opportunities within, but who would think about the dangers within? Those who could enter small mortal heaven were all experts from the righteous and demonic lineages, or the elites on the Longhu list. Even martial Dao masters had the risk of dying in there. If you weren't strong enough, you might even lose your life for some opportunities, let alone taking them away. And in small mortal heaven, the real danger wasn't the various traps inside, but the people. Small mortal heaven had been opened so many times, and there were countless rogue martial artists who accidentally entered, but how many of them could actually walk out with the opportunities? Only a handful. If my Azure Wave Sword sect used all our strength to enter, do you believe that not only would we not be able to obtain any benefits, but there might not even be 1 out of 100 who would be able to come out alive? But Dou Guangchen was still unwilling. But the opportunities are right in front of us. If we stop because of the fear of danger, this disciple is unwilling. Lu Gongyuan let out a sigh and said, "Forget it. Then you can bring your men in. But you have to explain the dangers to the other disciples. Those who are willing to enter and fight with you can enter the minor mortal sky. Those who are not willing will guard the Azure Water Sword sect with me, and continue the legacy of the sect." Dou Guangchen was stunned. "Master, are you not going?" Lu Gongyuan shook his head. "I am already old and can't fight anymore. The intensity of the competition in small mortal heaven is definitely beyond your imagination. I may not be afraid of death, but I have to protect the last trace of hope for Azure Wave Sword sect." As he spoke, Lu Gongyuan looked towards the back mountain, where Shenbai was in seclusion. That was the last hope of his Azure Wave Sword sect, but it was also a hope with an uncertain future. Chapter 544. The Wei County of the country of Yan had never been considered prosperous. In the past, the Wei County was the Wei Kingdom, a vassal state of Eastern Qi. After the Wei Kingdom was destroyed by the country of Yan, the entire Wei County was hostile to the northern Yan, regardless of whether it was the common people or the sects of the martial arts world. Moreover, it was impossible for the northern Yan to slaughter the people of the entire Wei County. Hence, the Wei County had always been an ungoverned area and developed on its own. Usually, it was rare to see the warriors of Eastern Qi and Northern Yan coming to the Wei County. However, with the opening of Xiaofan Heaven, all the sects came after hearing the news and entered with the key in hand. There were also some warriors who did not enter but were waiting outside to receive them. When people mentioned Xiaofan Heaven, they only knew about the opportunities within, but they did not forget about the dangers within. If the warriors who came out were seriously injured and on the verge of death, they would be able to rescue them in time. When Guan Xiu and Chu Xiu arrived, there were already countless martial artists gathered outside Xiaofan Heaven. There were people from the various sects who were in charge of receiving them. There were also some people who didn't have the qualifications but wanted to watch the show from the outside. After arriving, An Lionian said coldly, "I'll go in first." After saying that, An Lionian took a step forward and entered the twisted forest in front of him. His figure disappeared within it. Everyone who entered Xiaofan Heaven would be sent to a random place, so there was no need to enter together. Xiaofan Heaven would exist for 10 days. After 10 days, Xiaofan Heaven would disappear into the space and everyone would be expelled. Moreover, there would be some restrictions in entering Xiaofan Heaven, such as strength. There was no lower limit for the warriors who entered Xiaofan Heaven, but there was an upper limit. As long as an expert in the true fire spirit refinement realm entered, he would definitely be suppressed by the rules of Xiaofan Heaven, and the power of heaven and earth would constantly crush him. So once an expert at the true fire spirit refinement stage entered it, it was practically impossible for him to move a single step. He could only forcefully rely on his own strength to resist the surging energy of heaven and earth, and it was simply a waste of effort. Therefore, after trying a few times, the true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse stopped trying and left the opportunity to others. However, this was not bad. After all, the power of the true fire spirit refinement realm was there. If a powerhouse of the true fire spirit refinement realm were to make a move, the entire minor mortal heaven could only become a battlefield for top sects like the Great Light Temple or the moon-worshipping cult to fight. The other sects that did not have the true fire spirit refinement realm would not even be able to get the leftovers. Before coming here, Guan Xiyu had already given Chu Xiu a booklet. It was filled with descriptions of the various sects' geographical locations and dangers in Xiaofan heaven over the years. However, this thing wasn't very useful. The outside world was changing, and so was the world in lesser mortal heaven. Even the terrain was changing at the same time for some unknown reason. Now that 30 years had passed, no one knew what had changed inside. When the people in the outside world saw Chu Xiu come with Guan Xiyu, it immediately caused a commotion. The Guanzhong torture room was very low-key in the outside world, but Guan Xiyu was actually quite famous. As Chu Kuanga's successor and one of the top 10 existences on the leaderboard, almost everyone knew Guan Xiyu. Moreover, Chu Xiu was an outstanding person ranked 4th on the Longhu leaderboard. He would definitely be one of the main characters entering Xiaofan heaven. However, Chu Xiu had offended many people in the underworld. In addition, his reputation wasn't very good. Therefore, his appearance only caused some commotion, but no one came to talk to him. Guan Xiyu said to Chu Xiu in a deep voice, "Are you going to enter with me later, or are you going to wait for your friend?" Guan Xiyu was talking about Lu Fengxian. Before he came, Lu Fengxian had already stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm with the help of Lu Wenho's real spirit fragment. However, he still needed to consolidate his realm, so he didn't set off with Chu Xiu. However, he would be able to arrive in time in a day or two. However, Lu Fengxian wasn't from the Guanzhong torture room. Of course, Guan Xiyu wouldn't waste time waiting for Lu Fengxian. As for Lu Fengxian having the key, Chu Xiu didn't hide it from Guan Xiyu. Based on Guan Xiyu's character, he wouldn't snatch Lu Fengxian's key. Moreover, ever since the battle with the Dong family in Jailing, everyone in the pugilistic world had heard that Heaven Alliance's Chen Qingdi favored Marquis Jr. 1, Lu Fengxian. He was considered half of Lu Fengxian's backer. If anyone wanted to touch Lu Fengxian, they would have to weigh their own weight. Chu Xiu said, "I still have to wait for Brother Lu for a while. Hallmaster, you can go in first." Guan Xiyu nodded and said, "All right, you should hurry up. Xiaofan heaven is only open for 10 days. Don't waste it. Remember, although you have the strength to fight a martial Dao Grandmaster now, martial Dao Grandmasters who are qualified to enter Xiaofan heaven, even if they are itinerant cultivators, are not weak. If you encounter a martial Dao Grandmaster, hide if you can. Don't be too arrogant and treat your opponent as a martial Dao Grandmaster." Unlike the others in Xiaofanshan, Chu Xiu's opponents were only the elites of the younger generation and martial artists below the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. Guan Xiyu was also afraid that Chu Xiu would be hot-blooded and provoke some martial Dao Grandmasters. That would be courting death. Chu Xiu nodded. After Guan Xiyu entered Xiaofan heaven, Chu Xiu stood there alone and waited. Actually, Chu Xiu was not only waiting for Lu Fengxian, but also Xie Xiaolu and the others. Chu Xiu's popularity in the pugilistic world was not very good, but he was not to the extent that he was surrounded by enemies. After Xie Xiaolu and the others came, Chu Xiu could join forces with them and discuss a few places. After entering Xiaofan heaven, they would find a chance to gather together. This was also the experience of the various sects over the years. Because the rules of heaven and earth in Xiaofan heaven were different from the outside world, communication jade slips and the like could not be used. Moreover, because of the changing terrain, there was no landmark. The various sects could only use the stupid method, which was to directly set up several gathering points in a direction. After randomly teleporting, they would rush to those places. If there was no one to gather, they would just keep moving forward. Anyway, they would always gather in the end. In less than half a day, Chu Xiu had already waited here, and there were already people from various sects coming here one after another. On the Buddhist side, the people from Sabodhi Monastery had already entered before Chu Xiu came. It was said that there were 2 old monks and a middle-aged monk, and there were no young people. This was very normal for Sabodhi Monastery. Sabodhi Monastery's Dharma cultivation was extremely demanding on one's own Dharma cultivation. The young disciples were still in the monastery reciting Buddhist scriptures. Most of the disciples from Sabodhi Monastery, who were qualified to wander in the pugilistic world, were not young. Because the Great Light Temple was far away in the north, no one had come yet. Instead, all the people from Dao sect had arrived first. The Chunyang Dao sect had sent an old Taoist and 4 young Taoists. The old Taoist had a horsetail whisk in his left hand and a sword in his right. His pure yang qi was unstoppable. Although he was old, he was as dazzling as the morning sun. On the other hand, although the 4 young people had the strength of 5 qis collecting in the origin state, they seemed a little immature. The Chunyang Dao sect was the standard orthodox Dao sect. The pure yang qi of Dao sect was vast and mighty. It could kill evil and suppress demons, and its power was well known in the pugilistic world. Over the years, as long as there was a major event like killing evil spirits, the Chunyang Dao sect would be involved. Moreover, they were not afraid of death, which was very admirable. In addition, the Chunyang Dao sect usually did not fight for anything and kept a low profile. Therefore they were not hated by others. Other than their stubborn character, Chunyang Dao sect had a good reputation in the pugilistic world. However, a few years ago, the young genius of the Chunyang Dao sect was killed by Li Feilian, who was ranked 6th on the Longhu leaderboard and previously ranked 4th on the Longhu leaderboard. The younger generation of the Chunyang Dao sect was somewhat unable to recover from the setback. The cultivation method of the Chunyang Dao sect was originally the most focused on the foundation. The cultivation was slow, so it was not easy to train the younger generation of disciples. Now that one was dead, it would take a lot of time to train another disciple who could stand on his own. After the old Taoist arrived, the surrounding people of the pugilistic world greeted the old Taoist and called him Taoist Master Zhenyang. The old Taoist had a strong background. He was one of the 6 Taoist masters of the Tiangang Hall of the Chunyang Dao sect, Zhenyang Zi. The Tiangang Hall of the Chunyang Dao sect had its own Tiangang formation. It enshrined the memorial tablets of the ancestors of the Chunyang Dao sect and the secret scripture of the Chunyang Dao sect, Pure Yang Dao scripture. It could be said to be the most important place in the entire Chunyang Dao sect. Usually, the Tiangang Hall was guarded by 6 martial Dao masters. They were known as the 6 Taoist masters of the hall, and Zhenyang Zi was one of them. After looking around, Zhenyang Zi said in a deep voice, "Everyone, did you see the gang of slayers from the demon sect? I'm afraid those demon bastards can't sit still when the Xiaofan heaven is opened. This is not the first time I've entered the Xiaofan heaven. This time, I'm not here for the opportunity, but to kill a few slayers from the demon sect to loosen my muscles." Someone immediately complimented him. He is indeed Taoist elder Zhenyang. He really abhors evil. Those guys from the demon sect probably heard of Taoist master Zhenyang's reputation, and they are so scared that they don't dare to show up. Chu Xiao narrowed his eyes as he looked at Zhenyang Zi. When it came to their attitudes towards the demonic path, the Temple of Great Light and the Pure Yang Daoist sect were the most extreme. They would not tolerate even a speck of dust in their eyes, and they would almost attack the moment they met. However, in Chu Xiao's opinion, the way the Chunyang Dao sect did it was a little stupid. The Great Light Temple dared to do so because they had the strength. Although the Chunyang Dao sect was not weak, they were inferior to the Great Light Temple. In the end, after so many years, the Chunyang Dao sect still did things their own way. There were many martial artists who died in the battle with the demon sect. Even the people from the demon sect would have a headache when they saw the martial artists from the Chunyang Dao sect. These guys were simply one-track minded. Unless they could not beat them, they would not stop until one of them died when they met. However, at this moment, a voice sneered, "Zhenyang Zi, you're a toad yawning. What a big tone. I'm right here. Kill me if you have the ability. Have you forgotten how Chong Qingzi, one of the 6 temple protectors, died? You don't know what you're talking about." A pale-faced middle-aged man wearing a white robe embroidered with cloud patterns and a white jade crown descended from the top of the forest. His aura was incomparably powerful, and his demonic aura even dyed the clouds above his head black. "Lord Yun Zhongjuan." Someone below immediately exclaimed. It was Lord Yun Zhongjuan, one of the 9 great god magi of the moon-worshipping cult. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.